It might be a little bit of an inconvenience, but yeah, I'm sure you could. Okay, so let's jump into the top headlines at this very moment. Happy Thursday,
Oh,
everybody.
yes, top of the hour,
Yeah,
just on time.
just on time. Here we go.
And happy Mother's Day in Thailand.
Indeed it is.
Oh, yeah, today?
Yeah.
Oh,
Happy
happy
Mother's
Mother's
Day.
Day. It's the Queen Mother's birthday, so that becomes our Mother's Day.
I see.
Gives you a little sense for who's running the show here in Thailand.
Who is the boss?
That good-looking king of yours.
Yes, super handsome, super intelligent, and I challenge
Never
anyone
ages.
to say otherwise. Let's see how courageous you really are. Go ahead and debate me on that one. So, the the top headline at this very moment, Thursday, August 12th, is from the Wall Street Journal that 3 U.S. senators unveil the bipartisan Open App Markets Act, which would force app stores to allow side loading and let developers use their own IAP systems. That's tremendous. This is they're breaking up the
what could possibly go wrong?
The worst, what could go wrong, the worst case scenario that kind of fear mongers would raise is that apps that have malicious code is now more installable, which is what we've had for the past 30 years. So essentially nothing goes wrong because we've had it for 30 years. So every app you've ever downloaded on your laptop didn't go through the app stores. So what exactly went wrong in the past 30 years? That's exactly what will go wrong now. There's really no difference. So the idea that you were intelligent enough to download apps on your laptop for 30 years, but you're not intelligent enough to download apps directly on your phone. Well, I don't know. Unless somehow that phone...
You're assuming everyone's as discerning as the folks on this room are. And
no, I'm not. Not at all, Dan. I'm assuming people are as intelligent today with their phone that the phone as a device doesn't lower your IQ. You're the same person you were when you had a laptop as when you are with your phone. Just owning the phone doesn't make your IQ drop dramatically. That's my only assumption.
Anyway, I'm not too concerned because people who want to,
nor should you be,
just go through the app store if they want to feel protected. So
correct.
Yeah.
So there's very little downside. The major loser in this, of course, is Apple and Google, who had these walled gardens of apps that they were controlling, and the amount of money that they were extracting from the app developers to the tunes of hundreds of billions of dollars. Now the very popular apps people can download directly and pay them directly. So more of the money, essentially the money will be transitioning from the bank accounts of Apple and Google into the bank accounts of the app developers themselves. That's the biggest.
I thought on Android you could sideload already. I thought that was the whole point.
Technically you can on both. And of course they did it in a very clever way that they hid very cleverly and never wanted anyone to find, because it means tens of billions of dollars a year for them to keep that kind of obfuscated. And now it's going to be, obviously they're going to somehow, what the interface will look like, we're not exactly sure. Nobody knows yet. But, the bill hasn't even passed yet. But assuming the bill will pass, which I imagine it will, then the apps will have to either allow other app stores on their devices or some kind of way that makes it easy for developers to let users download apps directly. So you'll have a link to download the app, and the app will be it's going to work just like it did with laptops. I mean, this is not rocket science. So the developer will host their own app on their own servers, just like they do with laptop apps. So when you go to adobe.com to download Photoshop, you download it directly from Adobe, directly to your laptop, as people have done, 500 million times. And you'll do the same on your phone. So you'll go on your phone to adobe.com and it'll say, download our app for iPhone or for Android. And you'll click the download button and it will download it into your phone, just like when you download it from the App Store.
I got it. So we don't have to go through the App Store now.
Correct.
Just Oh, that's nice.
Well, it's not such a big benefit for users, and there is an argument that there's a benefit to users by going through the app stores, because now you know for sure Apple apparently has confirmed that this is the
Greening process.
verified app from that developer.
Mm-hmm.
And what could happen is somebody could make a fake Adobe site,
Mm-hmm.
with a fake address, like adobephotoshop.com, which they might not own. And then it looks like Adobe, and then you click the button and you download an app, and it's a fake app just to steal all your data. But unless they make it feel a lot like the Adobe Photoshop app, which they'd have to basically clone the app.
So it's more for
But
the app owner. It's more for the app owner, right? Because if
Correct.
they go to the Apple Store, they have to pay 30% for
Correct.
any revenue.
But
Okay.
if they continue to allow the App Store to exist in parallel, then the users who
Exactly.
are, the users who are used to having that trust can still have it.
Correct.
It's just that,
although Adobe may or may not keep their app in that store, they likely will. Here's why. Because inside the App Store, some percentage of people discover apps in the App Store. For example, you learn about new apps all the time through the App Store that you didn't previously know about. The apps that get discovered through the App Store, they love being discovered in the App Store. It's free marketing. And because they got a lot of free marketing, they don't mind giving up the 30% of the revenue that they were getting. So, but the apps that people already knew about, right, which I would argue a lot of the apps on your phone you might have already known about, Snapchat and TikTok and da 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 da. And so you were likely to, know about those and trust those, and you might not have discovered those. Where it gets interesting is a lot of the problems of social media sites today is the fact that they are ad-based ecosystems. They're based on advertising. And the reason, to some extent, that they are based on advertising business models is because the App Store takes 30% of any transactions between the user and the app. And Snapchat and TikTok and Instagram and all of those apps said, well, if we're an ad-based ecosystem, Apple can't take the money from our advertisers paying us directly. They can take money from the users paying us directly. So rather than make a subscription model, which Apple would get a cut of, we make an ad-based model, which Apple does not get a cut of. So that's why the social media apps generally are ad-based models that Apple can't take a cut of. But that's really about to change right now with social commerce. When social commerce comes on, and this is what you wonder why social commerce has been lagging in the West to some extent, is because they're waiting for this law to pass. Because in the very near future, if you're buying on Twitter without ever leaving the Twitter app and you're making purchases and doing transactions, Apple is going to make the argument, we get 30% of that transaction, hence no social commerce. So this would enable the side loading of these apps.
They don't do that. They don't do that with Amazon, though.
With the Amazon app, true, they don't.
Yeah.
So nor do they with Netflix. By the way, Netflix has a special exemption. So does one of the big game companies. Which one was it? Anyway, some of the apps get so big that Apple knows that those big companies would take them to court and kill them, and their whole ecosystem would explode overnight. Amazon's one such app. So now this is potentially going to open up more, a more libertarian ecosystem that hopefully will encourage more innovation.
What if we took this, right, and what happened in music and what's happening in music right now with Tidal and some of the self-financing?
Yeah.
And if you can recover that 30%, that's a lot of EBITDA recovery for a lot of startups, right?
Spotify was the first to come out in a big way and say this is bullshit. Spotify was, Spotify was in a catch-22 because the more that Spotify yelled, this is unfair, the more Apple tried to silence them and push Apple Music on top of Spotify. But in the EU, without trying to, get the ear of Tim Cook. Spotify has been working behind the scenes with the EU to try and get this overturned for quite a while. And then Epic Games came in, and now there's a bit of a snowball. And so that's what makes this quite interesting. The Wall Street Journal headline, 3 U.S. senators. Question is, who are these senators? Who's provoking them to do it? Because they, as senators, don't give a fuck. Be clear about that. But somebody does, and I can name names. And now they've got the attention of these 3 U.S. senators who unveil this, what they call the Open App Markets Act, which will force app stores to allow side loading. And Dan has a point. The app stores are going to say, "Oh, we already allow that. There's no need to change anything. Technically, we allow that. There's a little trap door hidden under that rock over there. You didn't know that? Oh yeah, sure. Of course you can. No problem. Just what
so
you do."
The language would have to be that it's transparent to the users, that
right? No
that
doubt.
trapdoor exists.
It's like Pee Wee Herman in Big Adventure, where he goes and sees the lady with the crystal ball to find his bike. It's in the Alamo. You gotta.
The Alamo.
It's in the basement of the Alamo.
Tyler, I think you and I, maybe Chris, are the only ones that get these references, these Gen X references from the U.S.
Yeah. So,
but Tyler, I have a question. Maybe the contrary thought. Anyway, isn't this like seizing private assets? I mean, Apple built this thing; it's theirs.
Yep.
It's like building a shopping mall and then having the government telling you what you have to charge tenants.
Yes.
There's gonna.
Yeah, it's rent control.
I think there's going to be the law of unintended consequences here too. Because, what if there's an app you want to yank and you can't?
Yes, it's essentially the same as rent control to some degree.
Okay, so rent control is an absolute failure, and I'll tell you personally. I used to work. I used to work for the New York City Department of Housing many years ago. Okay, and this was like the late '80s. Okay, and the city of New York.
This is a bit of a tangent. You realize we're going on here.
I know, but you brought it up. Okay, but we ended up owning the city of New York. Ended up owning 70% of the real estate in the South Bronx through tax foreclosure. And a lot of it had to do with rent control, because in the 70s, when we had the Arab oil embargo and oil prices went up through the roof, and a lot of those apartments and homes had used home heating oil. They didn't have natural gas, so it spiked really fast.
Yeah.
They couldn't raise the rents to compensate for their increased heating costs, so they handed over the keys. They just said, "We're not paying our property taxes. Here's the property." So I mean, we say it's like rent control. It's not really a good thing,
Europeans would argue with you on that. So, senators introduced legislation Wednesday that would impose new rules for app stores amid debate over the dominant roles Apple and Alphabet's Google play in the mobile ecosystem. The bipartisan bill by Senators Richard Blumenthal, Democrat of Connecticut, or Marsha Blackburn, Republican from Tennessee, aims to boost competition and consumer protections by placing new restrictions on how the stores operate and what rules they can impose on app developers. Senator Amy Klobuchar, Democrat from Minnesota, chair of the Senate Antitrust Subcommittee, co-sponsored the bill. This is the best reason ever to try and get Amy to join us here. This is by far the most relevant to us. So when Anna Marie jumps in the room, I think we finally have a good reason to see if Ms. Klobuchar might join us. Google declined to comment on the legislation. Google says that its Android system provides choice that others don't. Device makers and carriers can preload competing app stores alongside Google Play, for example. And what they mean is like the Samsung store, app store, on Samsung devices, where they did a deal with Samsung where Samsung wanted to have its own app store, and then there was revealed in the press recently very shady backdoor deals for billions of dollars to convince Samsung not to do that. Samsung can do that legally. Google paid them a behind the back, under the counter $1 billion deal to convince them not to do that, which this journalist from the Wall Street Journal, I hope in the next paragraph mentions this, but perhaps they won't. Called the Open App Markets Act, the measure is the latest reflection of lawmakers' concern about the power of major technology companies across a range of markets, including search, advertising, and social media. It aims to address longstanding concerns about developers such as Epic Games about in-app payments and other matters. The current Congress already has taken steps on antitrust policy, with the House committee passing a package of changes in June targeting Apple, Google, and others big tech companies. Signaled at the time they would wage lobbying battles over any major changes. The full House hasn't voted on the bills. And no, is it? Yeah, it's not even been brought to a vote yet. And you better believe this will be of any issue that big tech is concerned about, other than unionization, it's this. And in the case of Apple and Google, this is even bigger for them than unionization. In the case of Amazon, they're more concerned about unionization. But for Apple and Google, this is their worst case scenario. So they will spend as much as needed, because if they lose this vote, it will cost them, $100 billion. So why not invest that $100 billion to fight the bill? So, at Senate hearing, focus on we'll see how it shakes out. Here's a quote. It says from Mr. Blumenthal, who's one of the authors of the bill. For years, Apple and Google have squashed competitors and kept consumers in the dark, pocketing hefty windfalls while acting as supposedly benevolent gatekeepers of this multi-billion-dollar market, Mr. Blumenthal said. This bipartisan bill will help break these tech giants' ironclad grip, open the app economy to new competitors, and give mobile users more control over their own devices. Ms. Blackburn said that the tech giants are forcing their own app stores on users at the expense of innovative startups, adding that their anti-competitive conduct is direct affront to free and fair marketplace. So we can do a little poll, a little vote, see if for those who want to reveal which side of this they're on. Ken has a good argument that this is their device. If you don't like it, build your own device. Make a new phone, and with a new app store. And people on the other side, we can summarize both arguments very, very easily. That's Ken's argument and a lot of people's argument. And then the other side argument essentially boils down to there's only two devices right now. And so if you are making a new app, you don't have any choice at all. You have to give 30% to participate in. There's only two markets on the planet for app developers, essentially, in mobile apps, and you gotta pay a 30% tax to participate. Huh?
I hear BlackBerry's making a comeback.
Yeah, maybe. And that would be the point, is why isn't BlackBerry, if this was such a big problem, why isn't another device making a comeback? And the answer is Huawei is. And Huawei has their own app store. It's now a third app store. And unfortunately, it's if that was an Indian company, you better believe app developers would be jumping all over that like white on rice. But it's a Chinese app, and you, as a non-Chinese app company, you're not really welcome to participate in that. And Huawei phones aren't really available in the US, yada yada. However, Huawei is in Europe at my events, paying me to get on my stage to encourage European app developers to make their apps for the Huawei App Store, which they conveniently make it nearly identical to. And the Huawei operating system is essentially identical to Android. And so their Huawei App Store, which is called Harmony OS, their version of Android, which is basically Android, but with just a different load screen. And then their App Store is identical to the Android App Store, and you really only need to change, a couple lines of code in your entire app to make your app compatible with the Harmony OS App Store. And now there's a third App Store. And by the way, Apple will point out there actually is a third App Store, which is Huawei. If you're a developer, you have three choices, essentially. And of course, you have BlackBerry, and now you're going to have VR coming out, and that's a whole other app ecosystem with Oculus's App Store. They'll be very fast to point that out. And Niantic is coming out with their own thing, and Snapchat is coming out with VR. Now, it's really interesting that they're just now addressing this App Store duopoly. And nobody would argue that there's an App Store duopoly on mobile devices, really. But it's really at the final innings, or the final quarter, the end of the mobile era. We're now, we had the PC era from Windows 95 until the launch of the iPhone. Now we went through the smartphone era from the launch of the iPhone in 2007 until now. And now we're in the next few months, we're going to launch the next era, which is the metaverse era. So what's the point of finally cracking down on this when we're actually just going to be getting away and going into the whole new platform era? It's like it's a little too late now. But better late than never, perhaps, some app developers are going to say. So that's essentially it.
It's one thing to look at it just from the perspective of app developers, but if you look at it from the perspective of consumers, I think consumers have plenty of choice, because if they didn't, because Microsoft used to have a phone, Nokia had their own OS. If there was such a shortage of options for consumers, the Microsoft phone would have been more successful. The Nokia phone, it's
Facebook as well. Facebook and Microsoft both tried to make phones and they failed. So what can we draw? What conclusions can we draw from that?
I would just draw the conclusion that the consumer, maybe not the app developer who wants to make money off a particular app, the consumers are adequately serviced by Apple and Android, because they've plenty of choice.
Yeah,
Microsoft was in this game a long time before Apple. I was one of those nerds that had the Windows CE devices, and it was like the size of a brick, and and when I first touched the iPhone and I did the pinch, I was sold. That was it. I don't have to pull out a stylus and go find the corner of the screen and click, click, click to read a website. I can naturally scroll. So innovation, they I don't know where I'm going with this, but I just know that, Microsoft had their chance, and it was just a better product that won in the end.
Tyler, you want to take a moment to bring some regulars up first?
Sure,
Michelle is here, Mabana is here.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, Tom is here, Alice is here.
I'm looking, thank you. Okay, so feel free to, but the arguments on both sides are very predictable. And there's also the Americanness of these are both American companies at the end of the day, although they're global companies in some respect. But Americans are going to make American arguments about, these are companies, these are corporates, and they have these rights, and and then Europeans are going to have kind of different perspectives, that like what's better for the developers and the small businesses that are trying to build in these ecosystems. And that's kind of why the EU was pushing on this even before the US was, because it was EU startups and app developers that the EU was sensitive to, how they were forced to play into these two American platforms. The EU itself doesn't even have an app store. And that's why they're a little more sensitive to the millions of EU app developers who are forced to play in these American markets. And Spotify highlighted the kind of disadvantages they have playing against Apple in their own market, against a very directly competing app, for example, where Apple gives preference to their own app in a way which Spotify articulates as rather uneven. So this is a developing case. So it's going to go through the House and Senate. We'll see how it plays out. There's going to be all kinds of journalists. You're going to see headlines in the very near future about the amount of lobbying money that Apple and Google are spending to overthrow this bill. And there's going to be leaked conversations between Apple and Google and different people in Washington, D.C. and all kinds of, shady behavior being brought to light to try and prevent this from going through. And so stay tuned on that very brand new developing drama. So the next biggest headline at this very moment is Samsung announces the Galaxy Z Flip 3, which is their new phone for the year, which is a foldable phone. And the Samsung announces the Galaxy Z Fold 3, how Samsung managed to waterproof the Galaxy Z Fold 3 and Z Flip 3. And so that's the second biggest headlines. They had their streaming live event when we were doing this event, 14 hours ago. and it's their annual event, just like Apple's annual event that's coming up either September 7th or 14th, which we should know the answer to that question any day now, where Apple will do their annual event. Also, Xiaomi also announced their new phone for the year without really doing much of an event. They just put it out there. And by the way, they are quickly becoming the number one smartphone on the planet. They were for the month of June and July, and it looks like they will be every month going forward. So the next biggest article is an interview with Facebook ad executive Graham Mudd on Facebook's plans to enhance privacy in its ads, regulation, Apple's ad tracking prompt, Google's FLoC, and more. And this is all about the quote that came out yesterday of Facebook's very meaningful pivot is underway inside the world's largest social network. Facebook's massive business was built on its ability to track users across the internet. And so it's an interview with the head of Facebook ads named Graham Mudd, and I will tweet it out for those who want to read that. And no doubt they ask him all the hard questions about what Apple and Google are doing to limit the data that Facebook built their business on. And I'm interested to see what his responses are myself. The next big article at this moment is from about Twitter. Twitter rolls out a web and mobile app redesign, implementing its first proprietary font, which they call Tweet Font or something like that. As usual, our friend Jane in Hong Kong was the first to kind of figure all this stuff out. And let me ping her in here to see if she wants to make a comment on all this. And she even found a whole bunch of really interesting Easter eggs where you can get Twitter to tweet out the Twitter logo as part of your tweet, and all kinds of funny, weird little things.
The font is called Chirp, and people are hating it.
Yeah, it's kind of a weird font. It's a high contrast black and white. So now there's new follow and unfollow buttons and all kinds of stuff like that. So copying the link and tweeting that out to the Tech News Twitter account who want to see all the
I'll check it out myself, but what font family is it from?
It's a sans serif font. I mean, those are the two big families, or it's either serif or sans serif. It's a sans serif font, not surprisingly. It's in the realm of Helvetica. If we were using the biological, tree to figure it out, it certainly falls in the Helvetica Arial family. But it's got a little bit of rubato, I would say. Yeah.
There's another Twitter news, bigger one.
Another Twitter news?
Nigeria is going to lift the ban on Twitter.
Oh, they're lifting the Twitter ban. Okay. So James does a tweet of her own saying there's been a number of small visual refreshes being worked on across different parts of the Twitter UI over the past few months. When I tried it out myself before release, it felt gradual. Now that they've launched them, all I can finally see is the big picture. So I'll retweet her tweet so you can see what she's referring to. And Twitter design team did a tweet today saying, notice anything different? Today we released a few changes to the way Twitter looks on the web and on your phone. While it might feel weird at first, these updates make us more accessible, unique, and focused on you and what you're talking about. Let's take a deeper look. And it's a big tweet thread where they talk about Chirp, their new font, and they've updated their colors to be more high contrast and a lot less blue to draw attention to the photos and the videos. And the photos also, I think they finally release the new full screen photos, kind of edge to edge photos, instead of kind of bordered photos as they used to do. Because they're gonna do that very soon. Jane already found that in the upcoming code. And yeah, higher contrast buttons, fewer gray backgrounds, and unnecessary divider lines.
I just updated my app, and I don't see the pictures displaying as full screen or edge to edge.
Edge to edge. Yeah, they're not only are they going to be edge to edge, but when you're looking at Twitter photos, many times, they have rounded corners and they're not edge to edge. And in the very near future, they will be more similar to Instagram, essentially. So you can keep an looky-loo out for that. Jack Dorsey, even when Jane found it and tweeted it, a screenshot of it, Jack said, yeah, that looks much better. So if he has any say in that company, I guess it will. They also adding.
I can't tell what's off. There's something weird about like the kerning of the O. It's just really like tiny. And I'm sorry to get so nerdy about fonts, but
yeah, it should be more legible, more high contrast for accessibility reasons. And anyway, so Twitter update. There is another Twitter news that I found just minutes ago, which was what? Oh, they added a new emoji to their Twitter Spaces, which is a raise hand emoji. So when you're in the audience in Twitter Spaces, you're able to use emojis while you're listening. Like you can use a heart emoji to show everyone in the room that you liked whatever just said. Here it is. I'm tweeting it out now. Twitter adds new raised hand emoji to signal questions. If you're in the audience and you want to show that you have a question, you now raise your hand. There's a laugh emoji, a peace sign emoji, a fist bump emoji, and so that you can express your emotions while you're in the audience listening. And now there's a raise hand emoji from the audience. So everyone can see you have your hand raised, where in Clubhouse, people don't know if you have your hand raised necessarily. Although I think they updated that as well. So just tweeted that out so you can see that. Now back to the big headlines. The next big one is this big drama about the Poly network, which is a cross-chain protocol used by DeFi applications, decentralized finance apps, to kind of bridge the chains between each other. Says the hackers stole $611 million. We know that. But the update is, one of the updates is, now there's been an interview with the hacker, and it's quite a funny conversation, honestly. And here's part of I'm tweeting out now this Q&A session that they did with the hacker, where they said, why hacking is the question, and he says, for fun. Then the second question is, why Poly network? Like, why did you attack us? And he says, cross-chain hacking is hot. And then they ask, why transferring tokens? Meaning, why did you steal our money? Because you can hack us without stealing the money. So the question is, why transferring tokens? He says, to keep it safe. And this is a really interesting answer, by the way. He says, when I spotted the bug, I had a mixed feeling. I asked, and he says to them, ask yourself what to do had you faced so much fortune, meaning $600 million. Asking the project team to politely fix it so that they can ask the project team to politely fix it. Anyone could be the traitor. So this is a great point. He's basically saying, I had to steal the money once I realized there was the vulnerability, because if I had alerted somebody on the team that there's this vulnerability, I don't know who that person is I'm reporting it to. They might have a lot of friends that they could then notify and say, hey, here's this vulnerability. Take the $600 million. So, for example, imagine a physical building and you find a back door into a building. Do you tell the security guard, the first security guard you find, that, hey, there's a hidden door into your building that even you didn't know about? And then then you're just going to walk away and hope that security guard tells the boss that there's a vulnerability on the building that even the boss doesn't know about? What if that security guard goes and tells a friend, hey, my building has a secret entrance that even the boss doesn't know about? And then that money would have disappeared anyways and never to be returned. So he says, asking the project team politely so that they can fix it. Anyone could be the traitor given $600 million. There's such a huge incentive of $600 million, and he even argues $1 billion, that the security guard in that metaphor likely wouldn't have told the boss that a hacker is, tipped them off about this vulnerability. He says, I can trust nobody. The only solution I can come up with is saving it in a trusted account while keeping myself anonymous and safe, and then telling them you had a vulnerability. I have the money here. I'm willing to return it, but the money at least is safe here with me, because I couldn't trust alerting your security guard, your donut munching, low paid people, to correctly raise the flag to the correct authorities to really fix the vulnerability. But now that you know about the vulnerability, now that everybody does, you can fix it. I can return the money. Problem solved. Really interesting point that they make.
But this also shows that blockchain is not secure, right?
It's not necessarily a blockchain issue. There's other technologies built that there's other code that they built. The blockchain
so the
itself,
platform is not secured.
Their platform's not secure, right? Which is built on top of the blockchain. Code almost always has insecurities, and so, but the blockchains itself generally are secure. It's the things that are built on top of it. So,
but so anyway, this system is not secured now, right? So,
well, hopefully they're securing it, and then he's already in the process of returning funds. So, but it's a wild point that they're making. Anyway, there's a headline already that Twitter's new font Chirp is apparently giving some users headaches, like literally. Twitter's changes Twitter, and Twitter users complain on Twitter, but does Chirp make you feel like a woodpecker is pounding on your skull? Change is never easy, and Twitter users aren't afraid to complain. Those two truisms combined on Wednesday when Twitter unveiled a new design that includes new font called Chirp. A Twitter spokesperson says, "We tested the font and found that while it does take people a little time to get used to, overall, they like the change. We're listening to feedback about the font and will continue to improve it. Today we released a new changes." Yeah, so people are complaining it's giving them headaches. Please, please, please let us change the font back. It's incredibly difficult for me to read, and it physically hurts to look at. Oh boy, nice problems to have. Okay, so the next big headline at this very moment is the researchers create 9 computer-generated faces that can serve as master keys to impersonate almost half of the faces in 3 top facial recognition systems. Where's Charles when we need him? So let's ping him. Charles.
Yeah. Mabuana has a hot mic. You can mute him. Yeah.
Mabuana, if you heard that, here's pinging Charles. So let's see if Charles joins. Okay, and keep an eye out for Jane as well from Hong Kong.
Okay.
I sent her the invite about Twitter and what's coming up with Twitter and whatnot, and keep an eye out for Charles. Okay, so let's open that article a little bit. We can get a little more informed before Charles likely pops in. According to the paper, their findings imply that facial recognition systems are extremely vulnerable. Researchers have demonstrated a method to create quote-unquote master faces, computer-generated faces that act like master keys for facial recognition systems that can impersonate several identities with what the researchers claim is high probability of success. In the paper, researchers at the Blavatnik School of Computer Science and the School of Engineering in Tel Aviv detail how they successfully created 9 master key faces that are able to impersonate almost half of the faces in a data set of 3 leading facial recognition systems. The researchers say their results show these master faces can successfully impersonate over 40% of the population in these systems without any additional information or data of the person they're identifying. The paper cites previous research which showed a similar method for creating master fingerprints. According to the paper, their findings imply that facial recognition systems are extremely vulnerable. The master key faces tended to be older and didn't have glasses or facial hair. And they actually show the faces in the article that I'm retweeting now, so you can see these quote-unquote master faces. I'm still fishing to get the... Okay, so here's the nitty-gritty. It says researchers tested their method against 3 deep face recognition systems: DLib, FaceNet, and SphereFace. Lead author Ron Schmelken told Motherboard that they used these systems because they are capable of recognizing high-level semantic features on the faces that are more sophisticated than just skin color and lighting effects. The researchers used a style GAN to generate the faces and then used an evolutionary algorithm and neural network to optimize and predict their successes. The evolutionary strategy then creates iterations or generations of candidates on varying success rates. The researchers then use the algorithm to train the neural network to classify the best candidates as the most promising ones. This is what test teaches it to predict candidate success and in turn direct the algorithm to generate better candidates with higher probability of passing. Quote unquote, here's the quote, "We are interested in further exploring the possibility of using the master faces generated by our method in order to help protect existing facial recognition systems from such attacks. The researchers even predict that their master faces could be animated using deepfake technology to bypass liveliness detection, which is used to determine a biometric sample is real or fake." The paper also notes that white male faces over age 60 in the University of Massachusetts labeled Faces of the World dataset tended to be less varied compared to younger groups. So much of that group could be covered by a single older master face. Additionally, only 2 of the 9 master faces created were female, which the paper notes matches the much lower frequency of female faces in the dataset. The success of their findings shows how facial recognition software can be flawed and biased. Its continued use by law enforcement has resulted in multiple wrongful arrests, even when it has proven to be easy to tamper with. So tweeted out that one. And the next big one, we covered that Wall Street Journal one, is this one. Instagram introduces anti-hate speech tools to let users limit comments and DM requests on popular posts, meaning if somebody has a viral post, they inevitably start getting tons of DM requests from people they don't know. And what Instagram is doing essentially is looking at DMs, and if they seem to be rude, it'll just not push them through. And so Instagram itself on its own web, made their own announcement about these new features. For example, I will tweet these out now so that you can see them yourself. The ability for people to limit comments and DM requests during spikes of increased attention, meaning when you have a viral post, stronger warnings when people try to post potentially offensive comments, and the global rollout of our hidden words feature, which you can create your own list of bad words that you never want to see ever again, and then you'll never see any posts that contain those words, which allows
and
people...
Let's not forget about the Wikipedia API you're going to build in, right?
Sure. Which allows people to filter abusive DM requests. So in this example, they show stronger warnings to discourage harassment. So when people make a post or a message, a DM, that contains potentially inflammatory or hateful speech, you now get a pop-up notification that says, "This may go against our guidelines. This comment may contain racist language or other content that goes against our community guidelines. If you post this comment anyways, it may be hidden from other people. If your comment repeatedly goes against our guidelines, your account may be deleted." And then you can see the other bells and whistles in the new update of Instagram. So tweeting this one out right now to the Tech News Twitter account at TNATW. And then we've got this big story. Sources, the information, who's doing investigative tech journalism, say they have sources that DoorDash recently held talks to buy Instacart, which is a competitor in the delivery space, for between $40 and $50 billion, but the talks fell apart due to potential antitrust scrutiny. DoorDash held talks to buy Instacart over the past 2 months, say people familiar with the situation, for a price that likely would have been between $40 billion and $50 billion. And this seems to be legitimate because the FTC also was revealed to be investigating just a partnership between Uber's delivery, Uber Eats, and what's that new startup in the US that's doing delivery as well? Gush Pop or some crazy name like that. So DoorDash and Instacart, an acquisition like that, for sure, the FTC would probably prevent it, because they seem to understand the power of these companies. DoorDash and Instacart are really beautifully positioned to take over the economy. I know that sounds hyperbolic, but when that's where people are doing their orders and that's where they're paying their money, similar to Netflix, this is a great example. Netflix and their competitors are taking over movies because they are platforms, and you're placing your order for what you want to view, and the content you consume, digital content, you're giving your money to Netflix, and you're ordering your content through Netflix and their competitors, Disney Plus and HBO and whatnot. And DoorDash and Instagram is also where people are placing their orders and giving their money. And then they dictate where they buy that, where they spend that money to acquire the items that you're ordering. So the supermarkets and the 7-Elevens could likely all disappear very quickly if people continue their dramatic shift towards ordering, which is being enabled by, rapid delivery. 10-minute delivery is becoming quickly, a standard. As this whole process of, you pushing a button and it arriving at your door 10 minutes later, there's 10 steps in that process. All 10 of those steps are being optimized endlessly and automated, and the humans are being removed from that process at every step. And it's getting faster and faster and faster and faster. And so, it's only a matter of time. Inevitably, everyone will have 10-minute delivery everywhere. And at that point, the real power player in this is, there's two. The app that you place the order with, of course, has a lot of power. However, if they use a third party to do the delivery to your door, so if in currently, I believe DoorDash is doing their own deliveries with humans on bicycles and things like that. I believe Instacart is as well. They have their own team members doing the deliveries. However, they very soon are going to realize it's more optimal to have an autonomous vehicle of some sort do the delivery. And the question is, who owns that delivery vehicle? Because whoever actually delivers the actual product to your actual door can then circumvent the ordering process by putting a nice, big, huge notification on the box, or on the outside of the box. They will include a whole big advertisement on the outside of the box, a nice big red bow that says, next time you order, use Tesla.com, because Tesla's autonomous vehicles delivered the package. So if Instacart starts not using their own delivery humans and realize they need autonomous, and they don't have an autonomous delivery network, so they're using Tesla or Uber for their delivery, and then Uber actually does the delivery autonomously, because in the future they all will be, because it's a more optimal, it's lower price, lower cost, it's faster, and you got this, and somehow they place a little flyer on top of your delivery. You ordered, some Mexican food, and here it comes. And on top of the Mexican food, it says, thank you for using Uber. Here's a 10%, 20% discount next time you want to order from this restaurant. Use Uber.com next time you order this. And there's a QR code or whatever. They could undercut DoorDash or Instacart. So there's going to be a power play between the apps where you place the order. They're in a great position as long as they continue to do the delivery. They could potentially themselves be disrupted by who's ever actually doing the actual physical delivery to your doorstep. And that's why Google understands that, Amazon understands that, Tesla understands that. And that's why ultimately they're in the best power position in this whole inevitable unfolding or manifestation of this digital, digitized economy of e-commerce. But for the time being, the apps that are taking the orders, like DoorDash and Instacart, are going to undercut the 7-Elevens and supermarkets and replace them with robotic factories. They're also going to have to control their own delivery to not risk being circumvented and disrupted by whoever has the autonomous delivery networks, unless they collaborate to create a shared delivery network of some kind, or something like that.
So Tyler,
I wanted to. Sorry, can I chime in here quickly? Yeah, so I was going to say, this is a fascinating topic. Obviously, I'm coming at it a little bit from emerging markets, where I've seen, say,
your mic dropped, Mabana.
We can circle back to him.
Yeah.
Chris,
Chris.
Hey, Tyler,
yeah.
I wanted to add DoorDash is experimenting with robots and autonomous vehicles
right now. I didn't notice Jay was on stage.
Yeah. So I also wanted to add that because I know the designer that was working on it, she actually moved to Neuro, and she's I think one of the lead designers in Neuro, and Neuro is, I think, partnering with a few startups to do that market delivery that you're talking about, right? The supermarkets and whatnot. So it's going to be very interesting on what happens with DoorDash and Instacart going forward.
Jay, can I just say again how much we appreciate having you here?
You're welcome.
Jay's a seasoned veteran in this exact space and plays a significant role at one of the world's biggest delivery companies, which is Grab. And he's mentioning that DoorDash, the company we're talking about, who's talking about buying one of their competitors, Instacart, for $40 to $50 billion, because they realize they need to consolidate economically. Like, it's not sustainable to keep competing, but the powers that be, the FTC, is getting whispers in their ears from the supermarkets and the retailers saying, please, sweet Jesus, don't let those two merge, because then that'll be quite a tremendous force. In the US, if you merge DoorDash and Instacart, holy cow, that would be quite a power play. And Grab as well in Southeast Asia seems to me to be in the pole position where Jay's at. And then he's mentioning that DoorDash is working on autonomous delivery. And of course they have to be. They don't have a choice, and they understand exactly what I'm describing here. So it's going to be wild to see how this all plays out. But make no mistake, we're going to continue to optimize until you press the button and it appears on your doorstep before you get to the door. I mean, we're not going to stop pushing the boundaries until, what's the funny movie, the 7-minute abs? Okay, I'm going to do 6-minute abs. No, 5. I have a new program called 5-minute abs.
It's just going to be a mini bar, Tyler.
It's called the refrigerator.
With everything.
Yes. The 3D printing refrigerator.
What I was going to say is yesterday we were kind of wondering why this very small merger with an alcohol delivery service might, attract the attention of the FTC or whatever so quickly.
Yeah.
Do you think that's related to the distribution model that's in alcoholic beverages? Like it's almost like the cars where manufacturers typically have to go through a distributor and stuff like that. So do you think there's anything to do with that? The peanut gallery, Ken, or anybody?
Feel free if anyone's got a thought on that. I've not developed a thought on that yet. We got Maria.
And also there's a restriction as to what age and above, then you can buy alcohol, right?
Yes.
Will it be easy to control if you allow delivery of that sort?
Yeah, you're going to need verified identity of some kind in that regard. Yeah. So
DoorDash actually has to scan your ID, so the deliverer actually comes to you, and you actually have to show your ID when it delivers alcohol.
There you go.
Yeah. Hello, sorry, I'm back. My connection is a bit spotty. I just wanted to make a quick point. Is that okay, Tyler? Quickly,
sure, go.
Covered already.
Yeah.
I was saying that essentially, like in Africa, we're seeing obviously a lot of logistics startups, they often overlap. And one of the things that's interesting is that obviously food delivery startups tend to be built on top of the logistics companies, and some of them are trying to build their own logistics companies on top of that, which might make sense for them on a margin side, because they want to show that profitability of their service, and often service as well, control. Because remember, in emerging markets, there's no robots. The delivering and addressing is very difficult, and so consistent service is really important. But the other argument there is that, well, if you want to, as you know, Tyler, VC dollars chase growth. Yes, right. And so if you're slowing growth because you're investing in your own logistics company versus using the other third-party logistics to grow and show traction, even if you suffer a little bit in customer service, you want to show that growth. I think that's a really interesting dynamic in Africa where you're seeing these e-commerce companies, social commerce, food delivery startups trying to invest in their own logistics companies because they can control the margin experience, but really they should be working with the other bigger players and help them grow and sustain the service. The delivery until they get to a larger size. So it's a give and take. Obviously, in Africa, we don't have as many VCs as we'd like. And so you see a lot of startups getting lured by, I got to show good margins and not necessarily and good experience. I don't want to give up my margin to another competitor, to a logistics provider. So I'm curious if you're seeing that in Southeast Asia or if...
I love your point.
kind of. So I forgot the guy's name from Grab. If he thinks that's an interesting dynamic around, allowing startups to build, and they easily get duped into doing their own logistics so they control the experience, but really they should probably think about working with the Grabs, with the other logistics companies.
Such an interesting point. I hope everyone understood it in the same way that we do, which is, you're if you do it too early, you're going to potentially lose because your competitor is going to outgrow you. Where do you focus your limited resources? On growing, your user base, which is tremendously important, because if you transition too early into becoming more vertically integrated, that's a shift of focus. You're going to have to sacrifice some user growth at the expense of control, essentially. And VCs optimize for growth. So your competitor will outgrow you, get the next VC round before you, continue to grow and reach escape velocity. Meanwhile, you have a little bit more control of the distribution. You're a little more vertically integrated, but nobody really knows that for the time being. So it's a really that's an amazing tightrope scenario that these founders have to balance.
Yeah, and it's particularly the argument favors them when they think about markets where the others haven't reached yet, right? So who's serving, say, Ethiopia right now, or who's serving the third or fourth city? Maybe Kenya, in Kenya, Nairobi and Mombasa are served, but what about Kisumu and the other cities, right?
Yeah.
Often they're not there, and so you get tempted to okay, I'm going to launch my own delivery service because I want to cover that, and then it's like, well, is it worth? So it's a really tight balance to work, as I mentioned.
Yep. Okay. So let's get into the next biggest headline here, and it's about an autonomous driving startup. Although Chinese, the China-based autonomous driving startup Pony.ai suspends plans for U.S. public listing following Chinese government crackdown on domestic tech firms, meaning Chinese tech firms. Autonomous driving startup Pony.ai has put on hold plans to go public in New York through a merger, through a SPAC, which always seemed a little weird anyways. Like SPACs have an extra layer of caution, and a Chinese SPAC, oh boy, that's like double layer of watch out. So the merger with a blank check firm at a $12 billion valuation after it failed to gain assurances from Beijing that it would not become a target of a crackdown. Oh, yeah. So kudos to Pony. They asked Beijing, might we be cracked down on? Because if so, maybe we should not do the New York SPAC listing. And Beijing couldn't assure them that they wouldn't be the victim of a future crackdown, like Didi was. So they said, okay, screw it. We don't want to get sued and get in a whole lot of hot water. We don't want none of that smoke. So better we just not list in America, right? Right, Uncle G? And they said, right, Pony. You got it right. Come back home and do your listing here. So that's a really interesting article. I learned something very interesting myself around this recently, which is we understand now why China cracked down on EdTech. It's the birth rate. You and I understand that. Everyone in this room who joins us regularly understands that because of the endless other scenarios unfolding in Beijing at the moment around cracking down on the price of baby formula and cracking down on the ed tech, cracking down on video games and all these things that are about the birth rate. And there was something else about now they're cracking down on the fees of people who try to do matchmaking. Come on, it doesn't get more obvious than that. So no doubt they'll start paying kids to go out on dates soon. So if you want to play a video game, you have to go on a date first. If you want to unlock the next level of this video game, that would be amazing. You're playing this video game, you get to level 45, and now there's a physical challenge to pass level 45 in the video game. You have to go on a date to unlock and show the face of the person you went on the date with. And now you unlock the next level of this video game. So coming soon to a Chinese video game near you. But the why did they crack down on Didi? And why were they so obsessed about the data of Didi? And I saw a video of a Chinese entrepreneur and geek who was doing his own YouTube video explaining why Beijing cracked down on Didi, why they were so into DD's data. And he explains that it was because 2 years ago, a DD driver raped a passenger. And due to that, DD, there was a huge outcry, as it should be. And to fix that, DD is insisted on installing cameras in all of the cars to monitor, so they know what's going on in all the cars. And there's a microphone and a camera going on all the time inside the cars. And generally, that's a usable solution in China. They don't expect to have privacy during a car ride like that. Chinese citizens thought, okay, yeah, good, fine, we have no problem with that. So, however, DD is widely used as kind of a main means of transportation, even by members of the CCP, of which there's, it was reported there's 2 million party members. So there's all kinds of government officials using DD on a daily basis. There's cameras recording all the conversations all the time in those cars. So when DD went to IPO in America, they realized inevitably, shit, there's guaranteed to be at least a few hundred conversations that we don't want to be known of what was said in those cars. Chinese politicians talking with each other privately in the backseat of a DD ride. Come on, out of 50 million rides in a year, how many of those conversations potentially said something that would be tremendously embarrassing to the CCP? There's probably things that were said that are of intense national security concern, to be fair. So now you understand why the government was so understandably neurotic about the DD data potentially getting out of China. And which is why they stormed the building to crack open the data and take control over all of the data instantaneously as soon as the listing went public. So, and forcing them out, really wild. I have not seen any Western media report why,
it's totally a stab in the dark, but do you think there was any deployment or any attempts to, compromise some of these people that were in, because there's obviously a lot of footage that was seen, and things aren't ever secret, really. Do you think there's ever an attempt to, bribe an official or anything? I know it wouldn't go well there, but
I don't know. But the issue is that now audio can be just like YouTube audio. You can search in YouTube audio for words in any YouTube video. When you do Google searches, they already are looking in the YouTube video for the word you searched for. If you look for, some bizarre phrase, they'll show you YouTube videos that have that phrase in it, because you can, go through endless amounts of audio and transcribe it and search it. And they know that. The Chinese know that very well. So, it was a very dangerous potential national security issue, essentially. And, So next big headline is did we try to read this article about why did Pony suspend? Yeah, we know why Pony suspended it. Yeah. So the next article is about a startup called Tulip, which builds cloud-based software tools for factory workers. Raises $100 million at $1 billion valuation. Cloud-based software tools. Okay. It's a 3D printing unicorn founded to. Okay. The next article, believe it or not, is now this Sweden article from Reuters is now going a bit viral. And some of my friends, including so that's how Sweden's policy of putting a computer in every home and early concurrent investment in internet connectivity helped birth Spotify, Skype, Klarna, and other Swedish unicorns. And the headline really says how Sweden became the Silicon Valley of Europe, which I'm sure the people in London are not too happy about that headline. But a couple of my friends have tweeted about this article, including Matthias Lungman, who is a very good friend and is absolutely brilliant. And he was one of the co-founders of Atomico, one of Europe's biggest VC funds, who was started by two Swedes, Matthias Lungman and Nicholas Zenström, who's the co-founder of Skype. And they've had incredible success in investing in a lot of the European unicorns. And Matthias tweets out about this article: our European social welfare systems are proving to be great foundations to drive innovation and equal opportunity. Sebastian at Klarna speaks how it gave him a leg up as an immigrant son. And then Sebastian from Klarna, the CEO of Klarna himself, went to Twitter and said, I am grateful to Sweden for the opportunities and support it gave me as an immigrant kid and us as a company. I believe in particular, Goran Persson had the vision and laid the ground for Sweden's current prosperity, how Sweden became the Silicon Valley of Europe. And who's this other one? Hassan Kanji, Sweden's home computer drive and early investment in internet connectivity help explain why Stockholm has become rich soil for startups birthing and incubating Spotify, Skype, and Klarna, even though it has some of the highest tax rates in the world. Yep. Okay. So the next one is about WhatsApp. WhatsApp will let users move their chat history, including photos and voice notes, between iOS and Android devices, starting with the new Galaxy models. That's fantastic. And then the next one is from Asia. Shanghai-based MetaTrust Health, an online healthcare payment and pharmacy platform, raises $308 million. So medtech is still booming in China, no doubt. The company recently launched an initiative to support patients suffering from rare diseases by making access to treatment easier to obtain. The next one is from Chicago-based Hologram, which develops a custom SIM card to give IoT devices data access for multiple carriers. That's genius. Raises $65 million, led by Tiger Global, a Chicago Internet of Things startup that helps businesses bring their devices online, has raised funding as it prepares to undergo a major hiring spree. However, let's read a little bit of this because this is quite interesting, because IoT devices like dog collars and smart parking meters need to connect to the internet. The question is, how are they going to connect to the internet? And so this Chicago startup, Hologram, created a SIM card that allows companies to quickly connect their devices to the internet. And there's a bit of a secret sauce, obviously, where they say, what Stripe did for payments, we want to do the same thing for connectivity. As more businesses race to connect their devices to the internet, with ubiquitous connectivity, with companies seeking to gather more data from things in the field and control more devices remotely, they essentially are building a very specialized SIM card, which allows devices to automatically switch between local carriers. So that's brilliant, to find the best coverage, which is what they need. When your dog is walking around the neighborhood and it's, you have different providers providing different coverage throughout the community, you want it to be able to switch between carriers seamlessly. It has more than 3,000 customers, including Kellogg's, UPS, no surprise, because UPS now wants to track all of their cars in real time to let you know when the delivery is reaching your door, and Chicago scooter company Vio, which is similar to the Lime scooter electronic bikes, which uses Hologram to connect their electric scooters to the internet so that you know where the scooters are on a map in real time, so you can go find one. And so that they can find them and recharge them as well. So interestingly, it's still using the traditional networks of the data providers, which is the big telecoms, right? We talked about what is clearly a competitor yesterday, which is Helium, which raised a whole bunch of money from Andreessen Horowitz and Union Square Ventures and Google Ventures and other very super savvy investors. And they're building a truly decentralized network where any individual, including anyone listening in the audience, can buy a little piece of hardware, put it on a pole up in the air, broadcast a signal, and you start getting paid when people start connecting to your antenna. And the antennas connect to each other, and they build a huge mesh network. And boy, is that exploding! Helium is, holy cow! And
I just remembered that now. It's been a couple years, right, since they very, very first started, but I'm glad it's finally hit critical mass.
Yeah, it's wild how fast that's exploding. You can't buy the hardware now. There's like a 6-month back order for any hardware because there's that much demand for it. And they're putting up, hundreds of thousands of antennas, every month. So it's they're covering the planet very quickly. And at any major city in the U.S. and even all the small cities in the U.S. and Europe are all covered at this point, and now and China, and it'll have the world covered within a year. So And the beautiful part of that is the rates, because you aren't requiring as much payment as AT&T is, because you have much lower costs. The cost for the data is, an absolute fraction, single digit percent, 5 to 10% of the cost for these bike companies and smart parking meters and dog collars and all these IoT devices. Can pay pennies on the dollar for the data. And it's a better signal because the devices that they have send out the signal 10 to 20 kilometers rather than 1 kilometer, which is what 4G and 5G is actually very short distances. By the way, it's like hundreds of meters. So it seems like Helium is in a really terrific spot with the model that they have. So anyway, this hologram is certainly competing with their very clever SIM card as a solution for addressing the same problem. The next headline is a company called Verse Innovation parents a news aggregator called Daily Hunt and short video app called Josh, raising $450 million. Verse Information Innovation, the parent firm of popular news aggregator Daily Hunt and short video app Josh, said Thursday that they raised $450 million. Okay. Samsung announces their Galaxy Buds 2 with active noise cancellation and similar design to their Galaxy Buds Pro, available August 27th for $150. Trying to get the jump on a week later, Apple's going to announce their new AirPod lineup. So they're just, as Samsung and Xiaomi are announcing 1 month in advance. Other interesting headlines at the moment is Saturn, a social calendar app for U.S. high school students, raises $35 million from General Catalyst and Cotu, both fantastic investors, bringing the total of $44 million. eBay does its quarterly Q revenues up 14% year over year. That ain't so great. Not in the fintech, although they are acquiring other companies like Venmo and what to stay competitive. AppLovin beats with Q2 revenue up 123%. And workflow automation company ServiceNow is acquiring MapWise. Doxel, which uses computer vision to track progress on construction sites. That's an interesting use case. Raises $40 million. Upgrade, a digital bank focusing on personal loans and credit cards. Raises $105 million. Houston-based Cart.com, which provides tools to scale e-commerce businesses, raises $98 million. In a statement, China signals sweeping regulations of its tech industry will last until at least 2025 to ensure a healthy development of new business models. You have to admire that transparency of China announcing, all this crackdown we're doing that you're so panicked about, it's going to go on for at least another 4 years. Amazon opened.
The beatings will continue until morale improves.
Amazon opens its $1.5 billion 600-acre air hub in northern Kentucky, capable of handling 100 planes and 200 flights per day as it ramps up delivery speeds. As I said, the logistics rush will continue until the products magically appear in front of you as you desire them. And Amazon's got its whole soup to nuts vertical system, right to your doorstep. And so there will continue to optimize. 1.5 billion ain't nothing to speed up the delivery of stuff to your door. Coinbase amends its claims. Oh, that's a boring one. Facebook open sources time card. It's a timekeeping tool used using atomic clocks and navigation satellites to keep devices, data centers in sync. And now they're open sourcing that. That's nice of them to do that, actually. And then research shows semiconductor chip lead time slipped to 20 weeks in July, up by 8 days over June. So the backlog for semiconductors is continuing to grow. Internal iOS 15 code and animations show that Apple will let users link AirPods to the Find My network, which is very nice of them to do. So it's easier to find your when iOS 15 comes out in the next couple weeks, it'll be easier to find your AirPods in the Find My app. And then Microsoft fixes 44 vulnerabilities, including 7 flaws that are classified as critical and 3 zero-day flaws, with 1 actively exploited in the wild, as Microsoft is essentially Swiss cheese. I mean, there's no other, that's just an absurd amount of vulnerabilities, open vulnerabilities, active vulnerabilities. Just, it's an absolute shit show. You have zero privacy at all using Windows, essentially. And
a super duper amount of vulnerability.
Super duper secure mode. Just enter any which way you like. It's a house of doors. There are no walls. It's all doors. They're all unlocked. No key needed. Just go ahead and turn the knob and see if it works. If that one doesn't work, just try the next one and just come on in. The data's free. Help yourself. AKA shit show. So the other interesting headlines that people are finding is, we talked about this one, the Google work from home tax, as they're calling it. Google employees who don't come back to the old offices are now going to suffer the remote work tax. Well, they're going to get a pay reduction. And Google employees based in the same office before the pandemic could see their pay change if they work from home in another city or choose to not come back at all. Yeah, obviously. This is not rocket science. You're competing with people in other cities that cost a third or half to live in. So if you're competing with people in those cities, even if we only take America, for example, San Francisco is the most expensive city in America to live in, outside of New York, arguably. So if you're not going to live in San Francisco, we can hire people in Dubuque, Montana, for a quarter of what it costs us to hire people in San Francisco. And if you're going to go move to Dubuque, guess what? You're competing with other people in Dubuque, Montana. So guess what? You're going to have to compete on the same salary basis as them. And if you move to Romania, where people are willing to work for 1/10 of your current salary, guess what? You're you're competing with people that are willing to work for 1/10 of the rate. So this is just an obvious, why this is a headline, I don't understand. This is just obvious economics.
Tyler.
Yes.
And then I think the other piece to that, I mean, I completely agree with what you've said. I've spent half the afternoon, actually, we're only halfway through the afternoon here in Thailand, but kind of consoling a good friend of mine who works for the UN, and so officially his post is in Bangkok, but he was one of the lucky ones who happened to be traveling when the third wave broke out. So he's been living on the tropical island of Koh Samui for the past 4.5 months, and so the UN has just issued a statement saying that you need to get your tail back. I mean, policy, right? Policy wide, you need to return to your post as designated by your contract. Otherwise, it will be considered a violation of your agreement and abandoning your post. So, I think that you're absolutely right in terms of, the competitive salary and costs associated with people that live in different locations. And for, organizations or companies that tend to be more bureaucratic and hierarchical, I think it's also a matter of control. Who decides where people are working, even if they can't see them, even if people are working remotely. In this particular case, they want people to be working in the city that's on their contract.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. Here we go. More fun headlines here. Scientists discover enormous structure warping our galaxy. Astronomers have found a massive galactic structure extending around the edge of the Milky Way galaxy, according to a new study. Tweeting that one out. That's maybe that could be a good thing. The next one from Wired: Apple's privacy mythology doesn't match reality. Great headline. The company's claims cloak threats to millions of users' iClouds, iMessage, and facial verification data. Well said. Where this is obviously criticized. Wired, who indeed is kind of very pro-tech actually, is correctly criticizing Apple, where it says in 2021, Apple has cast itself as the world's superhero of privacy. Yep, it did do that. Its leadership insists, quote unquote, privacy has been central to our work from the very beginning, and that it's a fundamental human right. Its new advertising even boasts that privacy and the iPhone are the same things. Indeed, they did a viral video of an individual walking around town being stalked by cookies and killing them all as they were trying to follow him and everything else. this past spring, rolling out software update iOS 14.5 that empowers users to say no to apps surveilling their activity across the internet did demonstrate something important. People choose privacy when they don't have to struggle for control over their information. Now, only 25% of users consent, but before, nearly 75% consented by omission to have their information fuel targeting advertising. As Apple plans to add more privacy protections to iOS 15, which will be released next month, it continues to brand itself as a force for potentially capable for slowing down growth at Facebook, a paragon of surveillance capitalism. Unfortunately, Apple's privacy promises don't show the full picture. The company's most alarming privacy failing may also be one of its most profitable. iCloud. For years, the cloud-based storage service has further entrenched hundreds of millions of Apple customers in its ecosystem, an internet-enabled extension of your hard drive designed for effortlessly offloading photos, movies, and other files to your unseen backup drive. Unfortunately, iCloud makes it nearly as easy for the police to access all of those files. In the past, Apple has been adamant that it won't weaken the security of its own devices to build in a back door, but with older devices, the door is already built. According to Apple's law enforcement manual, anyone running iOS 7 or earlier is out of luck if they fall into the police's crosshairs. With a simple
Jesus Christ, no one's running iOS 7.
But they're making the point that, anyway, with a simple warrant, Apple will unlock a phone. With a warrant, that's very important, by the way, Apple will unlock a phone. This may seem par for the course in Silicon Valley, but most tech giant CEOs haven't previously proclaimed that warrants for their devices endanger the data security of hundreds of millions of law-abiding people, setting a dangerous precedent that threatens everyone's civil liberties. This service is, and by the way, so that's Apple's claim. Data security of hundreds of millions of law-abiding people, setting a dangerous precedent that threatens everyone's civil liberties. This service is available due to security vulnerabilities eventually addressed in a later operating system. Anyway, the article, as Wired is known to do, goes on for quite a while, and they're correctly it's all about the new child scanning, and that this is just so antithetical to all of Apple's main claims as a company, that is foundation to their identity. And just geeks globally are freaking out that Apple's kind of doing something so antithetical to their core mission as they claim it to be. So tweeting that one out so you can see that from Wired. And then the next one is the Taliban could take Afghanistan capital in 60 days. And speed of Taliban advance shocks governments and allies. Biden says he doesn't regret decision to withdraw U.S. forces. Taliban fighters could isolate Afghanistan. And it's a major concern, and mostly because of the on the optimistic side, 10 million refugees that are already leaving and already have reached Iran. And Cheryl sent a headline in from, I think it was CNN. There's a lot of journalists following the refugees as they flee Afghanistan into Iran, and they hope to reach Turkey. Some already have. But it's going to be wild. The next one is that mice sweat off their fat after being treated with this new substance. Scientists get mice to sweat out fat and lose extra weight in experiments. And what is this magic treatment? Researchers studying insulin resistance tested out the effects of a treatment on mice. The mice were overweight and unexpectedly lost weight during the experiments. Turns out that mice were sweating out an energy-rich substance known as sebum. Trying to lose weight, one group of researchers at the University of Pennsylvania School of Medicine may have stumbled across one potential mechanism that may allow fat to be sweated out of the body. They show that this has happened in their experiments in mice in studying thymolstomal lipoprotein. TSLP is a cytosine, a type of immune system protein. The research group has been studying the role of TSLP in overweight mice and were interested in its potential role in insulin resistance. In particular, what it discovered was something different. TSLP did end up affecting their diabetes risk, but it also reversed their obesity. The key to how this happened may be with what mice sweated out of their bodies. Here's the quote. When I looked at the coats of the TSLP treated mice, I noticed that they glistened in the light. I always knew exactly which mice had been treated because they were so much shinier than the others, according to the researchers and associate professor of pathology. And they were interested in the sheen of the secretions and wanted to test what it was. The team ran several tests and found that it contained sebum-specific lipids. Sebum is calorically dense substance. That is,
it's basically pimple pus. They're just using a fancy word to say that the thing got pimples.
Yeah, well, the sebum that comes out of the pores, which in teenagers, causes acne, of course. This was a completely unforeseen finding, but we've demonstrated that fat loss can be achieved by secreting calories from the skin in the form of energy-rich sebum, says Kambayashi in the press release. We believe that we are the first group to show a non-hormonal way to induce this process, highlighting an unexpected role for the body's immune system. The team wanted to know if TSLP was related to oil secretion in humans, and they found that it is positively correlated with sebaceous gland gene expression. This makes them think that it could be possible to ramp up sebum release in humans to be able to sweat out fat in a way that promotes weight loss.
Tyler?
Yes.
It's very fascinating that you've just found that article, because this is also part of what Bikram yoga has been sort of studying with Harvard, in terms of the fact that we go into a room for 90 minutes at 40 degrees Celsius and 47 to 57% humidity. And if you keep that up for a period of time, you will see the weight loss, but you have to keep up with the practice, and you also have to breathe effectively. So the oxygen component's important as well when you breathe in the room. And it's something that, I've seen testimonials. I've seen it with my own eyes, and teaching Bikram for 12 years now. No, 14 years now. So yeah, it's a very interesting dynamic to see it happen in real life. And if it's happening in mice, obviously there's some element that it does happen. And hot yoga has been truly a game changer for a lot of athletes, a lot of professionals, a lot of elderly, a lot of therapeutic needs. So I think there's a lot of study here that could probably even go further.
Okay. So the next one is, here we go, from MIT, that Chinese hackers disguised themselves as Iran to target Israel. But they left a few clues that gave them away. When hackers broke into computers across Israel's government and tech companies in 2019 and 2020, investigators looked for clues to find out who was responsible. The first evidence pointed directly to Iran, Israel's most contentious geopolitical rival. The hackers deployed tools normally associated with Iranians, for example, and wrote in Farsi language. But after further examination on the evidence and information gathered from other cyber espionage cases around the Middle East, analysts realized it was not an Iranian operation. Instead, it was conducted by Chinese operatives posing as a team of hackers from Tehran. The hackers successfully targeted the Israeli government, technology companies, and telecommunications firms. And by deploying false flags, it appears they hoped to mislead analysts into believing the attackers were from Israel's regional nemesis. And good times. That's quite bold to attack Israel on cybersecurity, as they are the kind of leading cybersecurity country at the moment, sort of the gold medal of the cybersecurity Olympics. So the next big headline is Wendy's to open 700 ghost kitchens. And why is Wendy's hamburgers, fast food, opening ghost kitchens? Because we're shifting from getting in our cars and driving to go get food to pressing a button on our toilet and having it delivered in 10 minutes. And that means you don't need to have an actual brick and mortar restaurant on the high streets and paying very exorbitant rents in high visibility areas. You can open ghost kitchens or cloud kitchens. And Wendy's is doing exactly that. 700 of them, in fact. 700 ghost kitchens. Wendy's has expanded its partnership with Reef Technology, which was originally a pilot of 8 units in Canada, to open 700 delivery kitchens over the next 5 years in the US, Canada, and United Kingdom. According to a press release, about 50 kitchens are expected to go live this year, and the remainder will launch between 2022 and 2025. Because someone at Wendy's understands what the fuck is going on that we talk about in this room every day. So kudos to you, Wendy's. Let me give you a little applause. Somebody there's
Newbury Park, Letitia.
Hey, shout out to the NP.
They got their head on straight.
And Tyler, if I can add, I think it'll be robotic arms as well. A robotic staff doing the burgers. They've been looking to roll this out for a while, and so this will allow that with COVID and climate change when they can't have the staff. A lot of fast food are suffering from having a staff shortage even now. So,
yeah, we've already seen the robotic French fry maker at White Castle, and so that's a no-brainer. That thing probably pays for itself in a month. The fast food chain has also created a $100 million strategic build-to-suit development fund, which will use additional cash obtained as part of Wendy's debt refinancing to drive new restaurant growth. The development fund is expected to drive about 80 to 90 franchisees restaurants. With the latest initiatives in place, Wendy's has raised its 2025 development target from 8,000 units globally to between 8,500 to 9,000 locations.
This is actually kind of brilliant because one of the big challenges in deploying anything in the restaurant industry is getting those permits, right? Like the plan check in LA County takes like 2 years or so. So, that's why ghost kitchens like Taobao are really successful.
Oh, Taobao's huge, yeah.
And this is a good move by Wendy because they're already applying for everything. All they just need to do is apportion the square footage of the kitchen for secondary or tertiary operations through the ghost kitchen, and boom.
Automate.
Yeah, and question on that, Tyler. This helium thing, and then this other company that you mentioned earlier that allows you to swap out between the networks.
Yes.
Like, do we see like that whole mesh thing then being critical to the expansion of like these businesses as they go into these kind of like ghost kitchens, etc. As and as drones come into play?
Right. Well, that kind of helium network will certainly play a role in the delivery, the autonomous delivery part. Not so much the actual kitchen, the ghost kitchen, but and by the way, the photo that they use of this ghost kitchen, which I just tweeted out to the Twitter account, it's a trailer basically, like a you can hook it up to the back of a semi truck and drive it somewhere. So that itself is really wild. I had not considered that. So the ghost kitchen, you may not even need to pay rent for the fucking thing. It's a rent-free thing.
Yeah, and that's right. And
it's
the
a
big
food
thing
truck.
You're gonna need is like the connectivity, right? Because you're gonna need to get the orders in.
It's
and
even
you have your truck somewhere.
It's even better than a food truck because it's far cheaper to produce a trailer than a truck because you don't need the engine. Because you don't need to move the thing all the time, once in a while, right? When the police come along and tell you to move it, okay, great, call the truck once a month and move it somewhere else. So you could put this ghost kitchen in the back of a trailer, which a trailer costs nothing. It's just a box with two wheels.
And for example, I'm sorry, Cheryl. McDonald's makes its killing primarily on breakfast, right? So you would move it closer to wherever people are working. Or, well, I guess remotely now.
It's truly genius.
But,
here's the other genius part of it. Not only is it genius because you might not even need to pay rent for it, but it's like a free rent ghost kitchen. That's truly tremendous. But even better, once you start rolling out your service in a geography, take any city X, and in city X, you start seeing where the orders are coming from, you can optimize the location of the kitchen to where the bulk of the orders are coming from.
And Tyler, it's also like climate change because the food trucks in LA, they came a lot when LA was locked down. They came a lot of food trucks to Orange County. And they would go to, because Orange County was never locked down like LA in the past pandemic as far as restrictions. So a lot of food trucks from LA drove out here and was at the beach.
Tyler, I just took a look at the picture. How about food hygiene?
What about it?
Well, food hygiene. If it's not handled well, if somebody have food poisoning, I mean, I'm sure they need so-called inspection, right? For food hygiene of this
right.
Well, restaurants,
yes,
even food, even the ghost kitchen. So how are they going to ensure that? Because I'm looking at the picture now. It looks very mobile. Yeah, sure. So where are they going to get their clean water?
Sure, there's already millions of these all over America. This is not an issue.
So they allow that?
Yeah, we've had it for 20 years, Cheryl.
Oh
They have
God.
to be what's
Okay.
called commissaried, Cheryl. So all of these, by regulation, have to come to a official, well, an approved yard where they go get their water, go have a place to dump out their waste, etc. So these have been around, like Tyler says, forever. What we call them is we call them roach coaches back in the day,
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
kind of as a joke, but they all
Mm-hmm.
come out of a central facility.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and remember back whenever Tyler, we were talking about these like new buildings and big apartment blocks getting built up, and the the data and those people who are going to come in as being critical, for selling broadband connection, etc., etc. You can imagine a situation where you get really good market research on new build areas, and then actually the
Yep.
plotting of these things is done based on the demand versus on the high street. Go to
Yeah.
the area.
It's wild. I'm just kicking myself. I hadn't considered the trailer
A
aspect.
A/B
Mm-hmm.
testing for ghost kitchens, and then like really 10 years from now, the ghost kitchens are just going to have little pods that the little neuros pop out of.
Yeah.
Well, you look at that photo of that Wendy's ghost kitchen. It says right in the bottom left-hand corner of it, uh, for delivery only via Uber Eats and DoorDash, and one other one, Skip Dishes. So they're delegating out the what do you call it? The delivery, which is a bit dicey. However, not really, because Wendy's is a brand that people have a connection to, similar to McDonald's. They won't be disrupted, right? Because people have a particular affection for a McDonald's Big Mac or a Burger King
And
Whopper.
they get to see the DoorDash traffic, because if you go to any fast food place in America, they have a sign that says either go to one of the delivery places, right? And so they get to see all this traffic, and they're realizing like, wow, a lot of people are paying $2 or $3 to get a burger delivered. We better get in on this.
Right, but I'm realizing now that the traditional mega brands that people have loyalty to, like Starbucks, like McDonald's, they won't be threatened by. They can use any delivery system they want, because the delivery system can't replace them. Right? They could put an advertisement that say, hey, next time, order. We have
Yeah,
our
you wouldn't get
So these 700 ghost kitchens, are they directly owned by Wendy's or are
a
they
groceries.
franchisee?
yes, by Wendy's.
Oh, direct. Okay,
They're
because I know
franchises.
They're
McDonald's are usually
commoditized.
franchisee, right?
But it's really interesting because I think it's a great example of a major chain kind of learning from, startup food trucks, right?
Totally.
So the food truck business, really flourished. And I know when I was on campuses in the US, we were really working hard to bring food trucks to campus to give students more options. And of course, the food service companies like Aramark and others that we've contracted with in the past, they were all against it. But when I look at this photo, I'm like, that's just a food truck and they're using someone else to deliver it. And so, I think that innovation can come from so many places. And often it's the people or communities or companies with the fewest resources that can be really innovative. And I think it's smart of Wendy to say, okay, what can we learn from what people who can't afford rent, have never been able to afford to rent their own storefront? What can we learn from them, and then how can we scale that?
Yeah. So I mean, they got clearly some young smart folks steering the ship over there. That's brilliant. I'm literally kicking myself. I hadn't thought of it before. Not
And their
It-
culture is adaptive, because you could have young smart folks or just really creative people within any company, but if especially an old established brand like Wendy's,
Yeah.
but if you don't have the right leaders who are
Yeah.
receptive to innovative
Yeah.
ideas and ways of doing things, you'll
Well,
just
you know what's funny?
go
They
down.
they may have
Yeah.
got. I'm wondering if they may have been acquired by a private equity company, particularly one out of Brazil, as as Burger King did about 2012, and Burger King made a quite a strong comeback at once this private equity company bought it over and started bringing in all this cool technology. And that's how I got into Burger King, because the private equity company was run by these Harvard Business School grads who were all about tech and all about optimizing and all about cool shit. And they brought me right in. I was like, great, hallelujah, high five. And the traditional team that was still there. And there was this huge friction between the new private equity Harvard Business School grads who just bought the company and the traditional VPs at Burger King who liked doing things the old way, the traditional way that, was leading to their death and demise. And there was a lot of friction. I was there during that friction, and that was not fun to watch. So anyways, this is the kind of thing that, like, when a whole new ownership comes in, you know what I mean? It's like, hey, we're doing things a whole new way here. Ken?
Talia, I'll just very quickly say that I've read the article and I know a lot about Wendy's. I would not, unless you have some other information, assume that these are corporate owned, because typically Wendy's doesn't own its restaurants; it's a franchise system.
That's
Unlike
what.
McDonald's, where they kind of sometimes own the land and rent it to the franchisees, Wendy's basically puts the real estate onus on the franchisees. So I'd be curious as to, you know, I mean, maybe because this is like a test thing or whatever, maybe these are corporate owned. I don't know who Reef Technology is, but I wouldn't necessarily assume that they own them given their history.
We will see. We will see. It's wild. Okay.
The last thing is, Ken, the build out on a restaurant is just really nutty, especially these days with things like grease traps and the environmental
Oh no,
regulations.
this could be a really good idea. I just don't know
Yeah,
whether they own these.
like, but I mean, a trailer. I know about this because we bought a trailer for my mom's restaurant, and it was a nightmare. But at a top end, a full kitchen's going to cost you about 80 to 100,000, and to build out a restaurant, I don't even want to know.
Hey, but Chris, I'm just curious, if it's so easy to get a license, including the hygiene, to meet the hygiene standards, right? Then anybody would just open their own food trucks and, well,
Cheryl,
It
this is
happened a lot out
Yeah,
here.
people did
this.
that,
It's
Cheryl.
not.
And
It's
you
true.
actually lease them, Cheryl. That's the other thing, is that most
uh-huh,
of them are leased. Like
yeah.
you pay $100, $200 a day, and you hope you make 300, 400, and
Yeah, yeah.
you
Eh,
know.
but I'm just curious, what do you think? Will people still depend a lot on food delivery after after the pandemic is over? Or everybody just want to go out because we have been trapped at home for 1.5 years or 2 years?
I think it depends on the market. The type of restaurant. I mean, I think some people certainly want to have the dine-in experience, and then I'm just thinking of all of those days where I was stuck at the office, couldn't get out to grab lunch if I didn't have a lunch meeting. I think that need will always be there, and it has grown over the course of the pandemic, especially as restaurants have develop new models of providing services. So I don't think that it's going to evaporate once we move through this pandemic.
Mm-hmm. And this kind of mobile trucks, I mean trailer, right, will only be possible in countryside, right? Because in cities you don't have parking space, right?
Well,
No,
sure,
no,
if
no.
I could add, oh, go ahead, Lakeisha.
No, go ahead, LS. Go ahead.
I just think it's a hybrid, Cheryl. It's not one way, it's not binary. It's going to be, you got robotic arms, there's some that can flip a burger, cook fries. You're going to see more of this roll out in these trucks. Military's had it for a while, something like that. So what you're envisioning, or what I'm envisioning, is a world where these trailers, as Chris said earlier, they can be mobile, they can move around, they're less costly, and at some point in the future, this will be more sanitary where it's not humans doing it because of diseases. Because I don't think we're going to finish COVID this year or the next three, in my opinion. I think there'll always be a derivative of something. And there's also, to Dan's point, he's always, correct on or harping, climate change and climate migration is going to continue. So these are disruptions that are going to continue for about 3 to 6 years. And you're going to see a landscape change.
But for the time being, I tend to want to agree with Ken that it may be a temporary measure because I don't think they will invest so much to make this a permanent solution because nobody
I
knows
didn't
what's
say
going to
temp. I said it's like maybe a trial.
a pop
Sort
up,
of.
yeah, pop up, yeah.
But no. But that's why maybe the corporation would finance it as opposed to putting the
Mm-hmm.
burden on the franchisees. But to
Mm-hmm.
Chris's point, this may be very good for a franchisee because there's less
Mm-hmm.
capital investment. And
Yeah.
the other thing I would point out, Cheryl, the United States is nowhere as hygienic as Singapore. We don't put people in jail for spitting gum on the streets, so we don't have the same standards that you might over
No,
there. And
actually,
not to mention health.
we have food trucks
Not
in
not
Japan. in
Okay.
Japan, but it is like the yatai doing festival, but those are really controlled as well. So I'm just wondering, yeah.
And I promise I won't put in another word after this, Tyler. I know you're getting annoyed. The only real kicker, and where LS's point about the robot arm really makes a ton of sense, is one of the catches of having a food truck is you need to have a letter from a restaurant or a facility nearby where you can wash your hands and use the restroom, because that's a sanitary requirement as well. So you can't have an onboard restroom on a food truck. It's just a kind of a no-no. You can have hand wash sinks, but you need that quote unquote letter. And then they also do this kind of nanny-like thing, at least in Southern California, where they need to know exactly where you're going to go so the inspectors can do a prompt inspection of the facility. So that's, I'm wondering if these robot arms are really going to be in place sooner than we expect. And I promise I won't say another word about this, Tyler.
No worries. Okay. The next interesting headline here is that, according to the LA Times, something is killing gray whales. Is it a sign of oceans in peril? Yeah, that it might be. Perhaps worth investigating. And that's an opportunity for Dan to jump in with his green tech headlines. Dan, take it away. Anytime.
Sorry, I had to get the app on there. Well, let's see some interesting things. California setting first in the nation solar and storage requirements for new buildings, and I also just read they're also changing building codes to require heat pumps, which are much more efficient than regular heat systems are in air conditioning. So that's really good. Another article that oil and gas companies, I think they spent something like $400 million on Facebook ads to counter President Biden's clean energy message. And anybody who searches on Twitter for any kind of climate news always sees ExxonMobil ads popping up whenever you're looking at natural gas or anything like that. Algeria is burning. At least 42 people dead. Looks very similar to the Turkey and Greece pictures that you saw. And totally non-tech, but there's a guy that slid into home plate, and you just have to see the video to see. It's the absolute sauciest slide I've ever seen. It was the tweet. So it had nothing to do with technology, but it was still a pretty cool little thing if you like baseball. So, and I'm not even a baseball person, but I thought it was.
We did a green tech room yesterday, and this article about oil producers using Facebook to counter President Biden's clean tech energy message. And this is from the New York Times, and they spend millions of dollars.
A lot of money.
So here's the question: is in the way that Facebook is still protected as a platform where people can lie and be wrong and have bad ideas, and not just Facebook. All the platforms have the Section 230 protections, as they should. However, the Congress is now writing legislation to make an exemption where they aren't protected in a particular case where people give misinformation about COVID or vaccines and medical misinformation during a pandemic. If you share that information, you are not have platform protections. You, as a platform, will be responsible, legally liable. You can be sued and jailed, right? So,
right.
And that's because we understand the existential threat of being in a pandemic. Now, how long before we potentially do the same for as the climate crisis evolves and escalates, and those fires in Algeria start spreading all over America, and everyone runs out of power and runs out of water, and there's climate refugees.
They are, by the way.
Yeah, as all of these things are already starting to happen. Now. But as we start to realize we're in a situation that's even more dire than COVID, right? Once climate crisis escalates to a point that's more dire than COVID, would we then not apply similar policies to the platforms to say you cannot even deny
we should.
Yeah, if you have misinformation about climate crisis on these platforms, you as a platform will be responsible. You can no longer take money from Exxon, for example, or parrot their narratives, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. How far off do we think that might be?
I don't know how far off, but you're raising an issue which I think is sort of maybe one of the biggest stories the last few months that was not covered at all, and that is this research paper from Carl Bergstrom, who said that ad-supported communication networks such as Facebook are as much a threat to civilization as climate change is, because what it's doing is corrupting our ability to use information to make decisions, because misinformation flows more freely than information does. And over hundreds of thousands of years, humans figured out how to filter out bad information so that people make the right decisions, so that we survive. And in the last 20 years, that's been turned upside down because these companies make more money on misinformation because it has more, quote, engagement than information does. And therefore, people are, for example, not getting vaccinated and dying
Okay.
because of that very directly. And the same thing's happening with climate change. The IPCC report came out, said we have to act immediately if we're going to avoid the worst consequences, and we're not doing anything.
Okay.
And that's
So
partly because of that. So you're
if
right.
we assume everything you just said to be true, then a logical strategy based on that conclusion would be to use misinformation to influence the people who desire misinformation and consuming fear-based narratives. We should, in fact, create a misinformed fear-based narrative such that, for example, like the QAnon crowds and whatnot, we could then say, Bill Gates is working on a new virus, like a super COVID, and he's going to release it on the planet to kill half of the people if we don't get the CO2 down now.
I think you're trying a little too hard there. How about just banning the misinformation?
No, because they want
proposing is being done
what
for
influences them is misinformation and fear-based misinformation. So we need to give them what they're craving.
I'm not
so
sure.
Thanos is actually already on
people
Earth.
are using the misinformation because they're trying to get their.
Well, by the way, Dan, what I'm suggesting might not be misinformation. It's very, very likely somebody who can do genetic engineering is going to solve this whole problem by creating smallpox and wiping out half the planet.
Oh, you're saying for climate, yeah. I don't know what to say there. I think it'd be better to start.
But we could disguise it
for example,
as tinfoil hat QAnon misinformation, because that's the type of information that they are receptive to.
Well, it's also it's not just people being susceptible. There's a whole TV network in the United States called Fox News, which is create propaganda network.
They love fear-based narratives. Let's give them one. Yeah. But let's give them one that will.
Climate change is kind of a fear-based narrative.
Right. Well, I can give you the mother of fear-based narratives. Half the planet is going to disappear if we don't get the CO2 down in the next 5 years, because genetic engineers can now make super viruses to cut the population in half to solve the CO2 output problem. So you either figure out your CO2 output problem, or you have a 50% chance of disappearing in the next 5 years.
I'm not sure your plan is the best one there, but there's a lot of possibilities. In the Washington Post today, they had an op-ed from George Will that followed Steve Kunin's book, and he's just like a denier, like Bjorn Lomborg and everything. And the whole thing was just bullshit, and they allowed it to be published, and it just blew my mind that the Washington Post, the facts were not there weren't any lies in it. But the whole thing was a lie, if you know what I mean. Every particular line, if a fact checker read it, would say, oh, that's a true statement. But when you put it all together, it was telling you a narrative that was totally false and contrary to the IPCC report. And I wrote a letter to the editor on that one. So, yes, there's a lot of misinformation, even among, quote, the good guys. But certainly Fox News and certainly Facebook and all these other platforms are promoting disinformation. People are believing it. Russians are behind some of it, too. So it's sort of a national security issue as well. And again, as I said, this is, in tech news around the world, you're covering lots of little versions of this all the time, right? About particular companies and particular things that are happening. But really, it's taking a step back. It's really scary, and it's one of my biggest worries about the fact that we certainly can address climate change. By the way, it wouldn't even be very hard. I'm doing a room on Sunday, about what we can do. It's all kind of very straightforward things that would be good for the economy, create millions of jobs. Yet we're not going to do any of these things because there's so much confusion and disinformation out there, and that really worries me the most. I'm not worried about can we address climate change. I'm just worried that we just won't. Just because we will choose not to. I think, Tyler, you said this before yourself.
Yeah, well, there's not a clear call to action, and that's the failure of, and most people, is until there's a clear call to action, there will be no action. So stop complaining about the lack of action until there's a clearly established call to action. That's
well, that's what I'll be talking about on Sunday. Actually, exactly what we can do. So that'll be
So I
interesting
just
for
like
some
to add just
folks.
one more piece to all of this is that I posted yesterday an article that came out of the Twin Cities of Minneapolis and St. Paul that looked at their most recent heat wave, and what they found was that this temperature increase, it impacts different neighborhoods differently. So neighborhoods that tend to be located in industrial zones near factories, etc., you can imagine that they are warmer. I believe it was 8 degrees Fahrenheit difference between another neighborhood that's, 5-minute drive down the road that is on a tree line boulevard. So I think that when we talk about climate change and the impacts, I think that, it's really interesting if we could even drill down, within cities themselves. So even within the same city, you have neighborhoods based on structural, challenges, if you will, and historical implications that are experiencing it even more severely.
Climate change is like the most unfair thing ever. It's going to hurt the people the most that had the least to do with creating the problem. It's already happening in South America and Africa. These folks contributed very little to the greenhouse gases, and the wealthy countries, which contributed the most, they'll be able to withstand the impacts the longest. By the way, not forever, but the longest. And as you just pointed out, like tree-lined streets are much cooler than streets without trees, and that tends to be poorer neighborhoods. So it's all unfair, and it's really the most unfair thing. So we should keep that in mind. And again, really easy to start doing things about to change, but so far we're even in the recent bills that are getting passed right now. They took out so much of the climate stuff to make it bipartisan, which is pretty insane. So we got a lot of work ahead of us.
okay.
And Lakeisha, about the industrial areas, it's a lot of the waste heat from the air conditioning units because they're pumping heat out of the buildings into the atmosphere.
Such a good
And
point.
out here in the valley, San Fernando Valley, it's not unheard of to have just a regular summer day where it's like 120, in the valley. And I think that's also because of, the waste heat generation there. Whereas where we're from, on that same day, it's, 92.
Yeah, absolutely. Great
Okay.
point.
And one point, if I can add
Real
quickly,
fast.
Tyler, to Dan's point, I think, Dan and Tyler, to your point, you need to get the information somehow. We get it out there because when you talk about the misinformation or fake news, a lot of African Americans have had problems with the vaccine because of the Tuskegee experiment. And there are some, African Americans going out and said, look, that was 40 years ago. Do some research, get over it,
Like
figure
80
it out.
years ago. Yeah.
Yeah, okay, yeah. Well, I know, Lakeisha, but it's a
40 years
big.
ago was the 80s, Alan. Come
I know,
on.
but I know Tyler said it real quick, but we sometimes it has to be dealt with. So it's intriguing that Facebook and these platforms can put ads out, and maybe they should just be equal to other advertisers that are trying to put the truth out to quell the claims of the falsehoods. That's all.
Okay, here we go. The next interesting headline is how BioNTech created a new Delta-focused COVID vaccine in just a few weeks. The beauty of mRNA vaccines is their ability to quickly be updated, though the vaccine makers are confident in their original vaccines. And it's, this whole game of programmed vaccines is quite remarkable. And there's a nice article that I just tweeted out to the Twitter account. And another one with the headline, a fleet of winged underwater robots will patrol the seas for the U.S. Navies. The crafts are technically called littoral battle space sensing gliders, and they'll be able to travel as deep as 3,300 feet for months. So now we've got robotic spies under the oceans. And the CryptoPunks, I just tweeted this out. If you don't know what a CryptoPunk is, it was the first NFT series that has inspired many others. And it's these, how many were there? A few, 10,000 of them, something like that. And a few thousand, let's say that. And they all have a similar look to them. That's these little aliens. Is anyone
10,000,
yeah.
Tyler.
Okay.
10,000.
Is anyone in the audience using one as their avatar? No. So one of them just sold yesterday for $130 million.
Yep, pretty much crazy in the NFT world.
If you're to believe that, because now that makes this little, it looks like it was done with Microsoft Paint on Windows 95.
Yep, Tyler, welcome to the world of NFTs and crazy collectors.
Yes. Or did somebody transfer money to a friend and that's going to transfer it back next week to make
that's what they're doing, Tyler. Ping pong.
That would be too expensive to do with fees, so I don't know.
No, they are doing marketing. They're pumping it up.
The fees might pay for something else. I mean, there would be expensive fees in that big of a transfer for sure. But if they could figure out how to monetize off of the marketing value of it, it's an interesting idea. But if you have not seen a CryptoPunk, usually somebody in the audience is using one as an avatar. Is nobody using one at the moment?
No, actually, there's also some that are derivatives of that CryptoPunks, and the derivatives are also trading as well. Yeah. So they'll make the original. The original will give rights to make a derivative. Like if you look at my PTR, that's a derivative that I created with Adobe and Prisma. And it's a derivative of Nyla's long necky lady, which has a floor right now of 0.3 or something like that. So it started out as a 0.03 ETH floor, and she's already trading at about 559. And I've actually so graciously have already received compliments on this derivative from this audience. So there are collectors in the audience as well. And I think when you collect art, it's all relative to the person who's collecting the art, because Metakovan and Tubador, which are the two gentlemen from India that are the Metapurse, and Metapurse has a $60 billion fund to purchase NFTs. And I'll just repeat that. It's a $60 billion fund. And Tubador is in Clubhouse, and Tubador goes around these rooms as well and starts looking at the art of many of these artists, these NFT artists. And again, I studied art history for 4 years. You can't really put a price on someone's value of something that sees it for themselves. And maybe it may be in some ways people trying to pump and dump, but that's not something that's very familiar or something that's really happening in the NFT space. That tends to happen more in the DeFi space, pump and dump with the projects, because most artists are really emotionally attached to their artwork, so they'd be really offended by pump and dumps. And that's what got Bored Apes in trouble, because Bored Apes, obviously it was, I know some of the African Americans in the room would probably be sensitive to this, but Bored Apes, the gentleman that made the original artwork, did not realize what people were going to do with his derivative product of Bored Apes. And there was some real talk inside Clubhouse about what some artists had done with the Bored Apes on the derivatives, and it got a lot of attention. And it brought something up really good. It brought up the discussion about racism. It brought up the discussion about how art could communicate and share good things to people, and how to be really, as an artist, present to the communities that could be purchasing your art, that could be interested in your art. And, it's not just, Caucasians that are collecting art. You have also brown BIPOC people also collecting art. So it is about being really present. And that's where the NFT space is very compassionate and very human. And I really would highly doubt that it's a pump and dump. I would say there are some crypto whales that are putting in this money, and they see the value of it. But also, like you said, Tyler, they may have the money to spend and they want to play with it. Let them play with it.
Just to make one more comment, just remember, traditionally artwork are also used for money laundering. So just
Cheryl,
be careful for those people who are
Cheryl,
just be
you're
careful that those artists are not used by all this criminal work.
Of course, Cheryl, but this is it, right? This is it. This is the unique part. You hit the nail on the head, Cheryl, because notoriously real world art has been known for hiding money, right? Notoriously real world art has been notorious to hide money. So is real estate. So I think this is where it's really going to open up other use cases on how to navigate this art world, this NFT art world, so that at least those artists that are truly making a living from it are celebrated, and but also understanding that not to get so excited, Cheryl, like you just said as well, that in fact, you don't know who's collecting that artwork or paying you that kind of money, right? So it's also about being present, in my opinion.
Okay, give me 2 seconds here. PT Yoder, where did that article go? Okay,
it was actually Silently Tyler with his CryptoPunk, I'm sure.
Yeah, it's 130 million for a CryptoPunk though. This is like Van Gogh.
It's getting crazy.
This is
okay, Tyler. Who listens to hip hop in this audience? Who listens to hip hop? Let me give you an example of a crazy NFT. One of the guys in the room here has got one of the guys in these NFT clubs, just a normal Joe, bought for 4 ETH the photography of Biggie in front of the World Trade Center. And that is just an epic piece of photography done by Chid Mu. And he was like a famous photographer of like a lot of the rappers and stuff. And they were talking about it in a room earlier this week. He listed it for like something like 79 ETH. And he listed it just to hold onto it, right? Because no one's going to be crazy enough to pay 79 ETH. But he was having conversations because as an artist, he put it that high so that no one could get that piece of photography.
okay.
Because that was such an epic photograph with Biggie and like the Twin Towers in the back, because Biggie's passed away and the Twin Towers are no longer there. So it's an epic photograph. And I think this is where the world of art and music and NFTs are going to have this intersection of really being able to sort of, for the first time, have people value, collectors and people value their work. And yes, Cheryl's thought is still in my head, but I think there has to be a delicate balance of recognizing someone that's doing nefarious things by paying an over exuberant amount and then understanding the narrative and the story, why the art was placed at that price. And I think that's something, having studied art history for 4 years and knowing gallery owners and collectors personally, I think that's a very, very unique world. And it's, I mean, look, Basquiat's go for 10 million a piece, and Jay-Z has one, Russell Simmons has two. He's passed away, but it still holds its value, and people are still, chasing Basquiat's to hang in their living room. So I think it's also really present to the combination of both the nefarious things that could happen and understanding the NFT's artistic space of collectors and buyers.
Okay, here we go. Next headline at this moment is from Dr. Fran. It says, "Don't be alarmed. FEMA will test the National Emergency Alert System at 2:20 p.m. EST yesterday across smartphones, TVs, and radios. So everyone in America should have got an alert, and they're just testing the system, which is itself kind of concerning. Why they feel the need to test the National Emergency System, which I can't think of an example of when they did that previously. Kind of worrying.
Oh, Tyler, just to interject, it didn't happen, at least for me in the West.
I didn't get one, yeah.
Yeah, but they will follow up at the end of the month.
Okay.
Just in case that one didn't go through.
Okay. So the next one is that India to have over 150 unicorns by 2025, startups to employ 3.25 million people, and they're breaking their arm, patting themselves on the back for kicking out 200 Chinese apps, and boy, could they not wait to kick out the American ones, where they could employ another, 10 million people if they kicked out the American apps. So your move, Jack. Your move, American tech companies. They're already super excited about the number of, they kicked out 200 Chinese apps. They have 150 new unicorns employing 3.25 million people. You think they don't want to kick you out? Think again. Next headline, U.S. presses effort to secure Julian Assange's extradition from the UK. And this is from Wall Street Journal. The U.S. really wants Julian Assange, as he always knew, and he didn't fall for it, and he tried his best to stay away from it, but it's ouch. The U.S. government resumed its years-long effort to put Julian Assange on trial on spying charges, challenging a British judge's decision to refuse the WikiLeaks founder to be extradited. The U.S. is not going to give up. They want to make an example out of him, and ouch. Here's the next one. YouTube reportedly, this is from USA Today, from Alexandra, YouTube reportedly suspends Rand Paul's YouTube account over COVID-19 video displaying misinformation. Or disputing the cloth mask benefits or whatnot. And Ron Paul called the YouTube suspension a badge of honor. The next...
And isn't he also a medical doctor? So he's a U.S. member of Congress as well as an MD, I believe, right? So I think for someone like him in his political position is one thing, like the Marjorie Taylor Greene, but then I believe that he's a medical doctor. I could be wrong, but
He is. He's an ophthalmologist. He is.
yeah. So I think that it carries that much more weight.
Mm-hmm. So then Evan found the next one, which says the US, EU, Canada, and Brazil, among others, have approved or are finalizing the approval of the 6 gigahertz unlicensed spectrum use, opening up a huge bandwidth for Wi-Fi services. And Chinese court upholds death penalty for Canadian prisoner Robert Schellenberg, for drug smuggling, a day before another court is due to decide the fate of a Chinese CFO of Huawei. Coincidence? You be the judge. Next one is from David Craze, the sexism behind China's population crisis, where it says the demographic shift in China reflects the sexism in the part of the Chinese society more broadly, and China is on the cusp of a democratic shift that will profoundly transform its society and economy, and that has the Chinese Communist Party deeply worried because its population is collapsing, basically. The country has a massive and growing cohort of older people, and it is not replacing that aging population with anything close to the number of young people it needs to maintain its overall size, foster prosperity, and care for its citizens. In the coming 3 decades, the proportion of Chinese population that is working age, that is between 15 and 64, will drop from 70% to 60%. In 2019, for every working age person in China, there were 0.2, blah, 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 blah. And they go into how there's a sexist element to how the CCP fails working women. So the next headline is from Evan, can blood from young people slow aging? Silicon Valley has bet billions on it. And there's a lot of people in Hollywood getting youth plasma injections. Biotech startups are trying to hack the process of aging and in the process stave off the most devastating diseases. Yeah, it's a wild new trend. It's the hot new thing in Hollywood, everybody, and Silicon Valley wants in on it. Climate change is an existential public health crisis, especially as it pertains to communities of color, is the headline from the Washington Post. The true cost of climate change needs to include the health toll. Due to scant data, no one is calculating the total health cost of these worsening problems, like huge wildfires and the bad air. Bad air is known to reduce lifespan, hence wildfires, climate change, lowering lifespan, health cost, you get it. So I get back to my point, how long before we start, policing and the speech of misinformation around climate change and whatnot. The next one is, what if we could do psychology experiments in virtual reality? Professor Marcus Bindeman investigates face perception and face identity matching in virtual reality. Just tweeting all of these out to the Tech News Twitter account. And this one's hilarious from Evan. Is my career over? Experiments with codecs as developers start playing with codecs, because codecs can now write code like a developer. Developers are now wondering, is my career over? As they start playing with codecs and realizing, oh shit, codecs is doing much faster. What I used to charge clients hours to do, it does in seconds. So indeed,
Tyler, can we ask Codex to find you a job? Not you, but can you ask it, hey, find me a job? I'm curious what it would do.
Yeah. So there's developers are looking behind Codex now that it's been out for 24 hours, and they're realizing we're fucked. It's going to replace us, at least the front end developers. So I just tweeted that one out. You can read all about that. It's a great point. In fact, they were saying this as the initial demo was being revealed for the first time live from the live stream. People in the chat room were saying, we're fucked. Game over. Gotta find a new career.
Isn't it just a higher level? I mean, I used to do assembly language programming, which I guess no one does anymore because all the systems are much higher level than that. Isn't this just one step up, and therefore people will be spending more of their time on like the system design rather than the sort of lower level coding?
Yep. No more code monkeys. The next one Dan will appreciate and probably saw already from the New York Times from Professor Ossoff. California regulators approve solar mandates for new buildings. The state's Energy Commission voted to require commercial and high-rise multifamily projects to have solar power and battery storage. There we go. There's progress.
Absolutely.
The regulators voted to require solar power and battery storage in new commercial buildings and multi-story buildings to hasten a transition from fossil fuels to alternative energy sources. How do we replicate that in all 50 states in every nation on the planet?
And Tyler, real quickly, when is that implemented?
When?
Yeah, like what's the deadline for the
2080.
companies to comply?
So so right in.
No, I mean, it's for new building. It's for new construction.
Yeah. So here's the question, seriously though, is what led that process to actually happen, and how do we replicate it?
California's always been ahead of the country on this kind of stuff. In fact, I think we use half the energy per person.
Yes, not at all related to my question. How do we replicate it?
Well, as storage prices come down, everybody's going to want to have their own battery.
Again, totally irrelevant to my question. How do we replicate it?
Tyler, how about we put things on fire?
Yeah, that's what's happening in California. That's really what's
I'm
driving
just saying,
it, Tyler.
like, if there's a nature thing that we could recreate, we might actually get people to change their minds.
I wonder what led. We need to deconstruct the process by which this policy became passed to understand what the emotional and financial mechanisms were that led to this passing, so that it can be replicated.
Tyler, I would say,
Tyler, what if LS, what if one of those people that signed on this bill actually got touched by those fires and lost their house or lost
there
their,
you go.
lost some information?
Now
you know
you're
what I'm saying? So probably one of those senators or something probably just said, shit, man, it happened to me.
Correct.
And probably it also could have happened to some people's businesses where it was impacted, where they lost their businesses.
And this is the worrying concern, is once we actually understand the actual triggering events, the actual actions that translated into this new regulation, it might require burning down a politician's house. And if that's what it took, if it took burning down a politician's house to get them to pass this bill, that would be an incredibly simple act to replicate.
Small price to play.
But
now
Tyler,
you have a supermajority
I'm sorry.
Progressive. It's not that. We have a progressive state legislature.
And I would also add just 3 data points from a scientist standpoint.
Hold on, LS. To address Dan's point, as progressive as it is, it's some might argue too little, too late as it is. So my point is, it's also a state where we have very unstable power. There's a lot of power outages for a lot of people in California, and might that have had something to do with it? And because if people have solar power panels and batteries, you're no longer dependent on the state grid, which is that's very much in the state's interest, and prevents and is likely, because if the power does go out in California repeatedly, as it has been doing, California politicians' lives are at stake every time the power goes down. They're likely to be assassinated, and they understand that. So to reduce the likelihood of power going down, they, I think, correctly assess that the most expedient way to resolve that issue is to create more dependable power systems for all new buildings, because you don't want to put more stress on the already feeble grid, and they're not able to improve the grid for whatever reason to address new development. So they're making the new developments kind of self-sufficient and independent.
It's all of the above. It's that, and
Right.
it's the desire for California to go to zero emissions electricity. It's been in the works for, I mean, this particular one is
Yes.
fairly new, but the general trend has been going on for a really long time, even before
Yes.
the fires.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's everything.
Yeah, but politicians, what gets them to actually pull the triggers is very. It would be a very worthwhile investigation to figure out what really led up to this, like a little 90-minute
Well,
documentary.
a big
I
thing that
could
led
say
up to big thing is that it's so cheap now. It's something you can require because it's such a small
Yes.
cost increment.
Yeah.
Where it used to be a big
But the
cost
fact that
increment 10 years
it's not
ago.
being implemented globally simultaneously says that the cost isn't really the issue. You're right, the cost isn't the issue, but that's not.
Actually, in Japan, there was another article today about Japan doing something very similar, not with the storage part, but with the solar part. So yeah, it is actually happening and starting to happen.
Okay,
Starting
so
in a few places.
1/10 of 1% of the planet's doing it. Cost isn't the issue. What is the issue?
I was going to
It's
add. Oh,
Go ahead, Ella.
I was going to add three things that I've seen, Tyler, from this standpoint, data points. One is, as Dan said, climate change. Two is COVID, and three are, of course, the fires. But a point that might have been made several days ago, I wasn't in the room, is that PG&E, which is the
Pacific Gas and Electric.
California Power Grid, it's still under investigation about the Dixie Fire. That one of their a tree hit one of their power lines and started that fire. So you're talking, when you talk about solar, if a tree by wind or climate change hits, a wire, telephone pole, and then somehow hit that grid, that's what started the Dixie Fire. This has already been reported, but not widely because it's still an investigation. And this is the biggest fire that has ever been in California history, and took out these towns and historical things and everything else. So these climate change effects can have wind, because there's been winds a lot in California, more than normal in the past several years, or at least the past several months, excuse me. And so you're looking at a convergence of a perfect storm of COVID, windstorms, climate change, heat, and then you're talking about the fires. Then the politicians will react in that way. So maybe using, current disasters, unfortunately, in certain areas to highlight where technology can be a better solution.
Yeah. This is quite interesting because essentially California is telling new buildings, we are inept, we're incapable of providing you power for your building. You have to be self-sufficient on your own. You need to provide your own power to your own building. We are broken. Nor can we get you water. You're going to have to figure out your own water as well very soon, because it don't count.
They did
they're not
this with
saying that.
water.
I
Tyler.
guarantee you that
They're
will,
not saying
because
that.
the state can't provide them water. And
No. So the energy part, it's good for the grid. It's great
it
to
is
have
great,
storage at
but
local.
it's very
Yeah.
likely that the motivating factor is the realization that the state realizes they are inept and incapable of providing it. So if you want to build a new building, you're going to have to be responsible for your own power. And very soon, they're also going to have to be responsible for their own water, because the state is functionally broken and inept and incapable of providing water and power to new buildings. So if you want to
Tyler.
build something, you're going to be off grid. Every new building itself is going to have to be off grid. Yeah, go ahead.
Tyler, this is really interesting because the development that I live in Amsterdam, it's so funny you just said this, but that's why I call you Professor X. My unit pays for everything. So we have solar panels on our roof, and I pay for my electric, and I pay for my water. And it's actually how it is here in Holland, especially in Amsterdam and Rotterdam and Den Haag, the main cities. You have to pay for your own electric, you have to pay for your own water, and what that does is it makes you really conscious of your usage. And funny enough, I've actually been complimented by the energy company here. They're like, oh my God, you've used so little compared to everyone in Amsterdam. Because I think my electric bill is 10 euros a month. And it's because there's solar panels and it gets subsidized to the apartment. So if you don't use a lot of it, then you actually get a credit for not using it. So it's kind of cool.
But here's what's interesting is California realizing that it can't provide the power to new buildings is likely a factor in why they're forcing buildings to provide their own power. And indeed, California is having a very difficult time of providing power to Californians. So that could be replicated in states if people start cutting power cables to popular cities, and they say we're going to sabotage the power in our own state until you realize we need to replicate California's plans for all new buildings to be off grid, or you can continue to try and build on this very unstable grid. So I'm just showing
Tyler,
you.
but California gets a lot of sun, though. I mean, that's what's really interesting. They could really harness that, couldn't they?
And they're going to need a lot more.
You just
And
need
we
to
are. I mean,
store
we
it
have a
though.
lot of industrial solar, and this is saying it's a good for moving from the old grid to the new smart grid. You want to have distributed generation, and that's what this would be. You also want to have local storage. And you also want to have zero emissions, obviously, in the grid overall. This is a step in that direction. It makes a lot of sense, and it's great for everyone. It's great for the individuals that have it. It's great for the California in general, have better electrical infrastructure in the future. It's a really good thing. There's really no doubt. And by the way, California is usually starts these things. You'll see other states probably follow them in the future.
Storage is so important because, like, for example, and I'm sorry to get so nerdy, I studied wastewater treatment in college as well. And one of the things is they study is like when there's a Super Bowl, that's literally the peak demand incident of the year. And they plan cities around that sometimes. And how they mitigate demand is they have overflow pools that can handle just that surge event. So in California with energy, the energy storage really changes the game because energy generation is in real time. You know, you're wiggling that electron 60 times a second and it's going across the entire network and wobbling. And so when that generator shuts down, it shuts down for everybody. And having the storage in place really takes some of that demand off of the system at certain times. So I think you're going to see the advent of really smart home management systems where they're pulling power at the right times. It's smart loading, and Dan, you've mentioned that they do this, but I'm saying more for like economic advantage. Like you have a solar
Absolutely.
system, and this thing's calculating your maximum return, or it's
Yeah.
crunching Bitcoin, or whatever you got to do to maximize your return off of your energy. And so I'll shut
My
up now.
daytime rate is 50 cents a kilowatt hour, and nighttime is 15 cents. And obviously, even if you don't have solar, having a battery can help you,
Yeah,
time shift that. By the way, the battery storage is an amazing story, right? The last 10 years ago, a kilowatt hour of lithium ion battery was $1,000, and now it's $100. And now imagine it continuing on its way down over the next this decade. It's going to be an obvious thing you have in your house, just like you have a water heater. You're going to have your battery. It'll be so cheap, it would be kind of crazy not to. So yeah, it's really
And
changing, and the cost is really dropping amazingly.
And Dan and Chris and Tyler, I'll be quiet quickly, but just to interject, Tyler said, how do we solve it? Politicians follow the money, and getting the investor community to not reward PG&E or SCE who says, well, we need to make this profit at this time, this way, or we're going to divest and invest in startups or new companies and create the next technology, AI, algorithms, whatever it might be, to bring on this tech. I mean, the only person who's pulled it off successfully or one company is Elon Musk. And that's only because he was part of PayPal Mafia at Stanford and all these other things, where he spun off so many companies, but it's sort of bet on the future, not on today. And the investor community is still following him. There needs to be more of that, in my opinion, from at the incubator side of startups from the ground working on AI. If they've got the team, they're executing, put money there versus shareholders saying, "Where's my dividend for my return today?" So it's a domino effect.
And just to add to everything that's been said, as I listened to Dan and Ame particularly talk about their connection to their consumption, I think that's how we bring about behavior change. So in the same way that the organic food and movement has grown over time as people have become more conscious about what goes into their body, and I can attest to being in the village now. I mean, I'm really connected to my food. I know where everything comes from because we grow it or someone down the road grows it. I think to the extent that we can do that with renewable sources of energy, people will change their patterns because they take more ownership in the decisions that they make.
Okay, here we go. There's one climate article here from Heyman. from The Guardian UK. It says there's no getting back to normal with climate breakdown, unlike COVID, where you get back to normal eventually in some capacity. With climate change, there's only unknown and unfamiliar alternative futures that we can choose from. I kind of love that one.
That's true. And this year, which seems to be a crazy year, is very likely to be the coolest year forevermore. That every year after 2021 will be warmer than 2021. So, yep, he's right.
Tyler, there is remember I keep on toting this particular project because it's quite unique in Europe, which is Energy Web. And that Energy Web is actually doing that where they're harnessing kind of shared energy across like 7 countries in Europe. And they're a pilot because Energy Web is also connected into California, which is why I said I like that rabbit hole research. And when I was digging deeper into Energy Web and making some connections to the spider web, it is connected into California. And that is putting energy on the blockchain. So I'm quite curious to see how this project is moving forward, because there was some sort of parts of it where it connected back to Tesla and it connected back to solar. So this whole process is, I think, ramping up because of all that climate's happening. I think people are realizing they need to work like there's fire under their ass because we don't have much time. So I think you're going to see a lot more movement, faster movement in these projects, and as well as it moving onto the blockchain for energy, because then that's also a way that you're able to decentralize the usage of it so that people could actually use it in different places.
Okay.
Because you can't have one person control it, because then you don't get the decentralization piece of it.
Okay. Here we go. Next one up is how 3 startups are racing to beat Amazon in one-click checkouts. For more than a decade, Amazon's one-click checkout feature gave it an edge over other online retailers by eliminating the hassle of re-entering passwords and payment information. Then 4 years ago, the patent for that process expired. That has opened the door to a cluster of startups that have developed similar technology for online businesses. Companies that sell one-click checkout technology, notably Bolt and Fast, have attracted a total of nearly $700 million in funding from investors. Venture capitalists have been encouraged by the pandemic-fueled spike in online shopping and the success of $191 billion market cap of Shopify, whose subscription services enabled merchants to sell online. The startups recently enlarged bank accounts will be necessary. And it's just a taste of that article. Thank you to Francine Hardaway for that one. And then Hyperloop, started by my buddy Shervin. Hyperloop technology gets huge boost in newly passed infrastructure. The bill includes provisions to support Hyperloop projects in the US. So making some good project with Hyperloop. And blockchain technology could be set for a major security boost as researchers have developed a blockchain resistant to quantum computing attacks, because quantum computing is coming, which can easily crack anything. And the big concern is that it can crack blockchains. And now there's new blockchains resistant to quantum computing attacks. Thank
Tyler,
God. Yeah.
I have a really random question, and I don't know if you've gotten over it, or I don't know if you've gone over it, or if you've brought up the conversation again to sort of follow up on the Poly Network hack, because there were 2 interesting pieces that came up that in some bit of my research. There's 2 interesting pieces that came up. One is what I said in the tweet. This is very strange that something that needs to be audited at such a high level was not audited. And who was the auditing firm that did the job of auditing, right? That's one question I still have that I'm still perplexed by, because this is really odd at this large of a caliber. I also, too, feel that it's going to hit 1 billion because there haven't been as many of the wallets addressed yet. So there is still the possibility that there are still exploits and they could still be dripping the money out slowly, right? That's number 2. Number 3 is something very interesting. You could put your X-Files music on for this one.
Go ahead.
The blockchain service that had most of this money and this project was the Chinese CBDC. That's what I find really interesting. Blockchain name service is one of the largest pieces of it. So it's almost like they aped in to do their CBDC so fast, where they may not have had because I'll be real transparent. And listening to you, Tyler, in this room, the span of the CBDC was launched, what, in like 2-3 weeks?
Mm-hmm.
Was it about 2-3 weeks that it happened so quickly when we started talking about it and all of a sudden it came out? Well, if you dig deeper into, which I did, the majority of that was coming from that blockchain name service that is Chinese, that is CBDC related. So I'm really interested who they got to audit,
I think
which is very
Aaron did
interesting.
mention that the Chinese digital yuan is not on blockchain.
It is a
Well, you need to go a
blockchain.
little bit
It's
deeper.
not
It
a.
is a blockchain though, and it does
No, but
No,
plan.
Aaron said it's not.
MA,
You can ask
MA, if I
Aaron.
may,
Yeah, go
LS,
ahead,
MA, if I
LS.
may jump in.
It is
Yeah.
also in writing
Sometimes
document.
some of these things are being created, and I don't know this story yet. I haven't researched it, but a lot of things are what's called side chains, and this has
Yeah,
been
no,
around
this,
since
yeah,
2017. And
yeah,
but let me finish, please. But they could actually appear that they're on the the original distributed blockchain
correct.
ledger, when in reality they're
They're not.
actually uploading to the blockchain. They're actually doing updated files, and we don't want to get too technical, but they're doing it. They can do it quarterly, they can do it monthly, they can even do it every 3 weeks. So in reality, and I remember at MIT a while ago at Bitcoin conference, these sidechains will continue to come up. I personally think sidechains are great for smart contracts. I don't think they're great for currency or monetary means. I've always taken that position because they can be hacked because it's not a real network peer-to-peer data set. It's more of a batch upload when you're rating. And I think that's what's behind it. And I'm just guessing because I haven't done research, but Tyler's getting impatient and likes to move to the next story, but that's all I'm saying.
Okay, here we go. So the next one up is an experimental technology works to bring back sense of touch for those living with paralysis. Experimental research is working to improve the lives of people living with paralysis, finding a way to bridge the severed connections between their brains and their bodies. And this is a BCI update. And this is really wild because if you can tap into the brain and recreate the sense of touch, then you could do the same in VR where you could touch virtual objects that only exist in the air in front of you, but your hands could feel them. So the truly wild implications for that one. The next one is from Poppy, the Colonial Pipeline ransomware gang called DarkSide, who hacked, the big Colonial Pipeline hack on the east coast of the U.S., shutting down one of the U.S.'s biggest energy pipelines, is back under a new name. Told you, predicted. Just tweeting that out, and the real story here, I wonder if this journalist gets it right. Let's see. You probably remember the ransomware attack against Colonial Pipeline on May 7. A Russian cyber gang under the name of DarkSide hacked the company that operates the largest fuel pipeline in the U.S. The hackers knocked the pipeline offline, creating temporary gas shortages, and demanded $5 million ransom in exchange for ending their attack. You may also recall what happened next. The attack lit up social media and outraged Americans who waited for hours to refill their tanks, blah, blah, blah. And then it says the victory was short-lived. The DarkSide hackers appear to be back in business under the new moniker Black Matter. As I said, thank you. I'm going to take this credit. Many of you might not remember this though, because when Biden met with Putin in Geneva about 2 months ago, one of the main messages reported from both sides was that Biden says, you not got to stop this infrastructure hacking off, or we're going to cut off your gas pipelines to Europe. And Putin said, okay. And then there was another little hack. And then Putin said, we're not joking. Try it again and find out what happens. Play around and find out. And then magically, DarkSide disappeared. Poof, from the internet. We read that headline in real time here in this room about a month ago. And then about 2 weeks later, there was a headline that Vinay shared. Vinay, you remember sharing it? Is Vinay on stage? Where he says, there's a new hacking outfit that just popped up called Black Matter. And I said, even before DarkSide disappeared, that they're likely to fix this issue of the Russia connection issue. They're just going to take themselves offline, move over to Latvia, rebrand themselves, come back, and now the headline is exactly that. That Black Matter, which is this new hacking outfit that magically reappears 2 weeks after DarkSide disappeared from the internet. Now they figured out the connection that Black Matter, the new one that popped up 2 weeks ago, is in fact DarkSide that disappeared 4 weeks ago.
Do you think they did this to obscure searches because of Black Lives Matter?
No, I think no, because well, just funny that the name Dark Side and Black Matter was even there was even
Okay.
a hint there, but
It's late. I don't even know I asked that. That's so stupid.
the victory.
Like you're gonna search for
Yeah,
it, right?
the next operation launched about a month later after DarkSide folded and has posted ads on Russian language hacking forums seeking partners who can help it access the servers of major companies in the US, UK, Canada, and Australia with revenues of $100 million or more. If Black Matter is a reincarnation of DarkSide, as cybersecurity experts say, it would follow a familiar pattern for hacking groups, which frequently relaunch under new names, whether they attract too whenever they attract too much attention from authorities, and especially when Vladimir Putin tells you, hey, you have to break all ties and appearances of impropriety of connections to the Kremlin because Uncle Joe Biden is going to come kick my ass if you guys do any more hacking. So do me a favor, shut it down, move to Latvia, rebrand yourself so that I can tell Uncle Joe, hey, it's got nothing to do with us, Joe. That dark side thing disappeared. That was Russian. We were caught. You found the ties between dark side and the Kremlin. Our bad. My bad, Uncle Joe. My bad. But that's shut down now. So they're gone. Those guys are gone. Dark side is kaput, out of commission. They will not be around no more. We put that thing to bed. We shot that pony in the head, Uncle Joe. That thing's not coming back. Oh, that new one, Black Matter. We don't know nothing about that, Joe. No, nothing at all.
Tyler, are you making this a comedy show now?
This new Black Matter hacking outfit, just across the border from Russia over there in Belarus, we don't know nothing about that one, Joe. Nothing. That we really don't know anything about those guys. And by the way, they're not in Russia, Joe. They're in Belarus. We have no control of Belarus. We have no idea who those cats might be. And don't let the name fool you. Dark Side, Black Matter, just a coincidence, Joe. Purely a coincidence. I know what you're thinking, Joe, but let me tell you, that's a coincidence. So just give me a fucking break. This was one of the easiest predictions ever. They were had to shut down because of the heat that Biden was putting on Putin. They had to relocate out of Russia to kind of hide the connections. Although let me just give you an example. My own development team from my own startup were Russians based in Belarus, in Minsk. Just to give you an idea of how common it is for Russians to move into Belarus to work, because it's cheaper to live in Minsk than it is in Moscow, by the way. So that don't mean nothing. Russians moving over to Belarus. So there it is. Now it's been found out. As I said, oh wow, Black Matter. I wonder if it's dark side. And now it's found out that it is. And now common sense has prevailed yet again. Easy predictions all day long. So the next headline is cryptocurrency heist hacker returns now of the 611 million Poly network cryptocurrency heist. Now he's returned 260 million. So it's taking time to transfer all of this stuff over, but it looks like he's transferring it all over. And by the way, that's a props to Amy for that prediction, because she predicted even before he started returning the money.
Thanks, Professor X.
You're welcome. And I said as much when in our last meeting when you weren't here. And the next headline is that from Joe Williams via Sifted, which is a little sister publication of Financial Times based out of Europe, that Western armies turn to startups in the quote-unquote data war with China. Western militaries are losing the war to master a new world where everyday data has become a potent military weapon. As I keep saying, the governments have figured out the power of data, and Western militaries are losing the war with China, not a conventional war, but a war to master the new world where everyday data has become a potent military weapon. Every military is looking at AI as a big game changer, says Charlie Curtis, partner at French innovation consultancy SIA. Richard Gwilliam of British geospatial intelligence compact GeoLect says that Western militaries have been caught on the hop by Russia and China and are only now beginning to think seriously about how to exploit masses of freely available data. And when Russia and China have done is, or what they've done is, instead of just competing with us on platform warfare, they've been absolutely superb at asymmetrical warfare. We're playing catch up. He cites cyber attacks, misinformation, and interference around Brexit and Trump election as examples where Russia and China have successfully manipulated everyday tech like social media to destabilize the US and Europe. Western militaries have noticed this, as well as launching their own operations to counter misinformation and sow their own divisions. They have also turned to young private sector companies to help. Interesting article. Thank you for that one, Joe. The next one is this is a fun moment to play our favorite new show, Jeopardy, Tech News Jeopardy. Vinay's back. Hold on. Let's pause. Pause. Hello.
Bring the guys up.
Hey, Vinay. Welcome back, Vinay. I just clicked invite. There you go.
Yeah.
Can we hear you? There you are.
I am here.
Do you remember sharing the headline about a new ransomware gang called Black Matter?
Oh, yeah. And I remember you saying this is going to be the old guys coming back in a new avatar, probably in Moldova.
Correct.
Or Lithuania or
and now
somewhere.
It's being published that indeed they are.
I don't know. I all these Reuters, they should come to our room for the news.
I don't know.
And just give a heads up. I don't know what's wrong with these guys.
I don't know what's so hard about this. Anyway, yeah. So thank you for confirming that this was indeed. And before that, if people in Justin's room, in the politics and media room, I and another gentleman said even before DarkSide disappeared, that DarkSide will disappear and reinvent themselves in a few weeks in probably Belarus or Latvia, somewhere near there, Moldova even, and that's what happened. There we go.
And they'll do a few freebies. They'll do just like Subway's trying to reinvent themselves. So these guys will reinvent themselves.
Yeah, probably.
I think Vinay is like the Sesame Street word of the day guy. Like he comes in with
Blue
Subway, Moldova. Yes. I love it.
So here's a chance to play our new favorite game show, Tech News Jeopardy. One country in Europe may have registered Europe's hottest temperature ever of 119 Fahrenheit, 48.8 Celsius. Which country in Europe may have registered the hottest temperature ever recorded in Europe?
Has to be Spain or
Greece?
Italy.
I say
Greece.
No, Spain or Italy.
Wait, maybe Albania.
Italy, maybe.
It could be Italy,
Italy is on fire too. Spain.
I think it's
Italy,
islands like Mykonos and places like that.
Well, Vinay, you said two names. One, you said something in Italy, and then Cheryl was the first to just say Italy. So I'm going to give this one point to Vinay, 1 point to Cheryl for Italy.
I'll give it to Vinay. I don't need
Okay, Vinay, you get the point for saying Italy.
You're very generous, Cheryl. Yeah. Very generous.
And then MA actually gets a half point for saying it's an island because it was Sicily. And Shane, your very bizarrely accurate guess of Sicily is just a little too concerning, which makes me think you saw the headline previously. So,
actually, I saw
which, by the way, the question was country. On a technicality, the question was which country. But he did say Sicily, Italy. We got to give him a point for that. So it is Sicily, Italy reporting basically 120 Fahrenheit.
Yeah, Tyler, the South, a lot of the Europeans' vacations are getting really crazy. Like, for example, it's so nice in Amsterdam, or the weather's just gorgeous, and normally it's really rainy, and a lot of my mates that went to the south of France or the south of Mediterranean are, like, complaining it's too hot, and I'm, like, thinking to myself, wow. So they are getting, like, 40, 42, 43. They're teasing me because that's...
So somebody needs to invent 500 SPF.
Coconut oil, Vinay. Coconut oil.
Okay, next one.
Temperature.
Yeah. Okay, next headline. As the Taliban advance in Afghanistan, the finance minister of Afghanistan has gone running and has disappeared. The acting finance minister left the country as Kabul grapples with declining revenues, deteriorating security.
I think we can scratch the Taliban event, Tyler.
There will be no interview with the Taliban in Clubhouse. By the way, that was a crazy headline, was it not? With Paul in the room, no less, at the the Taliban were hosting rooms in Clubhouse.
That was a
The
sudden
best is
alert.
Faraz came in real late and you
Right.
brought it up. He's like,
Hell
no,
no.
no, what the hell's wrong with you?
Algorithmic bias is pervasive in healthcare. It needn't be. According to Stat News, healthcare organizations need fully transparent, bias-free AI they can trust to improve health, reduce costs, and promote equity. Speaking of healthcare, Newsweek reporting that the Lambda COVID variant is quote-unquote a potential threat to human society. Researchers say Japanese researchers have warned of the variant, which was first discovered in Peru in August 2020. And now they're claiming it's a potential threat to human society. And then David Grace has this one that ID.me expands their digital wallet of identity verifications to include COVID-19 vaccine IDs, and announcing the launch for people to securely share and verify their vaccination status, which I'm sure everyone in Texas is thrilled about that. And then Dr. Fran shares this one from Washington Post. The headline reads, heat index could soar to near 110 degrees Thursday in Washington, D.C. Holy cow, that's hot for Washington. And then we've got this one from Katarina from The Atlantic, that Delta is bad news for kids as more and more kids are falling ill because more are being infected, as Delta is wreaking havoc with younger populations. And then Dr. Fran has this one from SciTech Daily, that eye tracking virtual reality technology to make MRI a new experience. Researchers from King's College London have created a novel interaction VR system to be used by patients when undertaking an MRI. So now you can chill out in VR while you get your MRI. Todd McLeese sends this one from The Verge, that oversight board orders Facebook to restore post criticizing Myanmar coup. The geopolitics of moderation. I was in a Myanmar room yesterday with 20 folks from Burma, as they like to call it, and we talked all about this. And basically, the Myanmar has been taken over by the military at the request of China and at the support of China and Russia, where China is the only country on the planet formally recognizing the military as the new leaders of Myanmar. That gives you a little hint who might have been behind the coup. And so also were the mysterious airplanes from Beijing to Rangoon and Mandalay in the days leading up to the coup, when no flights were allowed in or out, with their signifiers off. Little tell that there might have been a little collaboration going on there. And when asked about it, they said, oh, we were picking up seafood. That was the reply they gave to the Burmese media at the time. Just a little hint. Just a little hint. Oh, and they caught pallets of mysterious items being sent from the plane into the airport in Mandalay from those planes. Well, they claim they were picking up seafood, but they were delivering something. Wonder what that something is. Anyway, the oversight board of Facebook says they have to restore posts criticizing the Myanmar coup, because the Myanmar military, who's trying to run the country, doesn't want people criticizing them on Facebook. Facebook's been shut down, by the way, in Myanmar. So I guess this is for people outside of Myanmar, people using VPNs. And yeah, why not criticize the Myanmar coup? Interesting articles from The Verge, just tweeting that out. But basically, the military doesn't want to be criticized. The people want to be able to criticize it. So the oversight board said you got to put it back. Next headline.
I'm sorry,
Yes.
Tyler. Sorry to interrupt. Can you? What was the bias in healthcare? What was the source? My apologies.
The link, I just tweeted it to the Twitter account.
Oh, okay.
The next one up is the FEMA just tested the U.S. National Emergency Alert System, and it shows a screenshot of it. It says, test alert. This is a test of the National Wireless Emergency Alert System. No action is needed. The test ran at 2:20 p.m. Eastern Time and is the first national test of the U.S. Emergency Alert System since the pandemic. The next one from Dr. Fran says, this is what one has to agree to. She took a screenshot. This is really interesting. Of South by Southwest, which is a huge tech event, and not just tech, music, media, film event in Austin, Texas. It's an annual event. And she took a screenshot of what people have to agree to create an account to attend South by Southwest. And it says, and I quote, and I just tweeted out to the Tech News Twitter account at TNATW. You can see it for yourself. I agree that South by Southwest may collect, process, share, and use my personal information, including my name, email address, etc., provided by me to create my account and purchase services or products offered by South by Southwest and its partners. I understand that my personal information will be processed by South by Southwest in the U.S. in accordance with the South by Southwest privacy policy. So you very transparently asking you to give up everything. And then this one from Vinay, that a sequential process, how Bangalore became Asia's Silicon Valley. Everyone's wanting to be, we got Europe, Silicon Valley in Stockholm, according to Reuters yesterday, and now how Bangalore became Asia's Silicon Valley. In the blog post, we explore the various factors that contributed to the growth of the IT ecosystem in Bangalore, making it the Silicon Valley of Asia, as they call it, although I'm sure Beijing and Shenzhen might argue with that, actually. And then the next one is up from Adriana, who listens from the audience via Bloomberg. The headline reads, Brazil offers lifeline to coal after the UN calls for a death knell of coal. Brazil is offering a lifeline to its coal industry, even as the world scientists make it crystal clear that fossil fuel use must stop to avoid the world's effects of climate change. And then Adriana also sends this one of how the Poly network all unfolded, and somebody is doing a full breakdown of exactly how the whole Poly network hack happened and how it's happening. So I just tweeted that out as kind of a lengthy story. Somebody named Cal Paddle tweeted in this article from Wired about how hybrid offices are creating tribes of people in the office and the people out of the office, and people in the office naturally are forming a tribe, and the people out of the office are forming tribes. So you now have hybrid office tribes are here, and they're a problem. The office cliques created by hybrid working could trigger major company culture issues, according to Wired. You could read all about it. Now, this is an interesting one that Poppy found. 4 things that GPT-4 will improve from GPT-3, which is one of the most important technologies on the planet at the moment, and is behind OpenAI's new codex that everyone's freaking out about at the moment. And what will be different about GPT-4? That's a really interesting question. So in May 2020, OpenAI presented GPT-3, and the largest neural network ever created, revolutionized the AI world, although researchers at University of Beijing claim to have a better version in Chinese. Anyway, OpenAI released its beta API for people to play with the system, and soon the hype started building up. People were finding crazy results. GPT-3 could transform and describe a description of a web page into corresponding code. It could emulate people and write customized poetry or songs, and it could wonder about the future or the meaning of life. And so let's get to the heart of the matter here. GPT-3 is big. GPT-4 will be bigger. Here's the reason. The title of the biggest neural network ever created is very ambitious. It could be just a tiny fraction bigger than other models. To put its size into perspective, GPT-3 is 100 times bigger than its predecessor, GPT-2, which was already extremely big when it came up in 2019. Increasing the number of parameters 100-fold from GPT-2 to GPT-3 not only brought quantitative differences. GPT-3 isn't just more powerful than 2, it is differentially more powerful. There's a qualitative leap between both models. 3 can do things 2 can't do. From this fact, it's reasonable to expect that OpenAI continues with this trend, making GPT-4 notably bigger than 3, aiming at finding new qualitative differences. If 3 can learn to learn, who knows what 4 could bring? We might see the first neural network capable of true reasoning and understanding. The results would further reinforce the notion that bigger is better. In the words of DeepMind's researcher Richard Sutton, the biggest lesson that can be read from 70 years of AI research is that general methods that leverage computation are ultimately more effective, and by the large margin. He calls in his bitter lesson in AI. We'll see if this holds up in the future. GPT-4 will perform better few-shot multitasking GPT-4 won't depend on as much good prompting. GPT-4 will have larger context window. And here's the conclusion. Here are my predictions about how GPT-4 will outperform 3. GPT-4 will have more parameters and it'll be trained with more data to make it quantitatively more powerful. It will be better at multitasking in few shot settings. Its performance in these settings will be closer to that of humans, and it will depend less on good prompting. It will be more robust to human-made errors and avoid the limitations of early transformer architectures. The context window will be larger, allowing the system to perform more complex tasks. There we go. And that's tweeted out now at the Tech News Twitter account at TNATW. The next up is from Forbes via Poppy. The military is developing new personalized protective biosystem technologies. This innovation will aim to create an elevated ecosystem of personal safety because of how genetic engineering is going to play into national security issues is the real reason, whether or not the article's author even knows that. So USA Today says that Lake Powell, a very important lake in California, water levels dipped to record lows, leaving tourists and businesses scrambling as boat ramps are closed at Lake Powell, having to force some houseboats off the lake, leaving tourists and businesses scrambling. And it's only early August. Wait until October. That's when the real fun will start. Iota variant is out. And the Iota variant increases mortality risk among older adults. Good times, it's getting more deadly. The findings reveal that the variant has considerably higher transmissibility and immune escape potential than previously circulating variants. Good times, it's getting worse, everybody. Iota variant's out, and it's worse than Delta. Higher mortality rate, higher transmissibility. Good times. Next one, future global urban water scarcity and potential solutions. I'm tweeting out the map now. I've told you to Google it. You didn't Google it. It's the water scarcity map. And you can see the populations of the planet that will be most impacted, including Southern California and all of Western India. And according to this nature.com, considered one of the best scientific journal publications, they're calculating 359 million people will be permanently suffering from water scarcity, meaning they'll have to move. 359 million.
That's the entire population of the United States.
Yeah, nearly identical to the population of the U.S. will need to relocate because they will be suffering from not seasonal water stress, but year-round permanent water stress. That means uninhabitable land. That means relocation. That means climate refugees. 359 million climate refugees is what they're predicting. And that's 12.5% of people, by the way. So 573 will have seasonal water stress, which makes the land uninhabitable for part of the year, which means they likely might move as well. And that's an additional 573 million people for a grand total of nearly a billion people. But the other, 5 billion people, they're fine. It's just a billion people that are going to have to move. It's just a billion. So no big whoop. And you can see where these people are on the map I just twatted on Twitter. So how Pizza Hut aims to turn weather forecasts into sales. Pizza Hut was the first to online food ordering. Now, after being eclipsed by competitors, it's turning to data, analytics, and AIs to catch up. Good on them. That's how you do it, Pizza Hut. Don't let Domino's kick your ass. A Berlin British embassy employee arrested for Russian spying. The UK national is accused of spying for the Russians since November 2020 in a return for undisclosed amounts of cash. And so some bad British person in the embassy in Berlin was spying for Mr. Putin. China overtakes UI and AI research. According to Nikkei Japan, jockeying for supremacy intensifies as the two sides grapple with security issues, according to Nikkei Japan. And Human Rights Watch claims China-funded hydropower dams built in Cambodia generates only about a third of their claimed energy capacity and have sharply curtailed fish catches. China's Belt and Road Dam in Cambodia ruined livelihoods, according to Nikkei Japan. And you can see a map of Southeast Asia and Cambodia, where the lower Sesan 2 hydropower dam is in northern Cambodia. And as it goes through Laos down into Cambodia and through Phnom Penh and exits the ocean near Ho Chi Minh City. And indeed, millions of livelihoods have been ruined as a result of this hydropower dam, which is giving power to China. And they share some of the power with Cambodia, which is why Cambodia allowed it, but it doesn't provide as much power as they claimed it would. Oh, what a surprise! It only cost you a few million livelihoods. So China won many diving medals in the Olympics, and Evan shares this article and video, more importantly, showing how China used AI and 3D scientific analysis to improve diving, and it's why they won all their gold using AIs and 3D renderings. It's truly fantastic. You can see that. And then Elon Musk offers for SpaceX to make NASA spacesuits because they're spending way too much. They're spending $1 billion in spacesuits, and Elon says, you got to be fucking kidding me. I'll do it for 1/10 of that price. We already make them for our own astronauts. We might as well help you out so you don't have to waste all that taxpayer money. Give it to Uncle Elon. There you go. So that brings us just 4 minutes past the top of the hour. Thank you to everybody for yet again another very fun and information-filled tech news around the world. We will see you in 5 hours. Go get.
Thank you.
You're welcome, Cheryl. Go get yourself a
Thank you,
Subway
everyone.
footlong
Thank you, everyone.
fish
Thank you,
filled
Tyler.
tuna sandwich.
Thanks, everyone.
Try the
I had tom yum noodle.
honey oat footlongs.